Did you know that cloud computing is revolutionizing the way businesses operate? In fact, global public cloud spending is projected to soar to an astonishing $591 billion in 2023, marking a remarkable 20.7% increase from the previous year. This extraordinary growth showcases the immense popularity and potential of cloud computing. The world has undergone significant socio-economic changes with the pandemic and remote work requirements, driving the adoption of cloud computing. Companies have swiftly embraced cloud-based applications to facilitate digital transformation and support remote workers, all while ensuring client satisfaction. As we march into 2023, the momentum behind digital transformation shows no signs of slowing down. Cloud computing is set to dominate the tech landscape, and you can capitalize on this trend with Simplilearn's Azure Advanced full course. So join our expert Microsoft Azure specialist as they guide you through an engaging video that dives deep into the world of Azure. Discover the fundamental concepts of Azure, gain an in-depth understanding of Azure's core principles, and explore the powerful features it offers. But that's not all. We will delve into the captivating services offered by Azure, uncover its unique differentiators, and discover how it competes with AWS and GCP. So by the end of this video, all your questions and doubts about Azure and cloud computing will be answered. Our experts are ready to provide comprehensive guidance and ensure you have a firm grasp of topics covered. If you're craving a more hands-on and detailed approach to Azure, Simplilearn's Caltech postgraduate program in cloud computing is the perfect fit for you. This comprehensive course will empower you with the knowledge and skills necessary to navigate the cloud landscape with confidence. So dive deep into the cloud architecture, deployment models, security, and migration strategies. Gain expertise in the leading cloud platforms such as Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to transform your career and join the ranks of successful cloud computing professionals. Click the link in the description to explore more about this course. And to help you better understand the impact of cloud computing and our cloud computing certifications, here's a success story of one of our learners that will help you build your belief and boost your confidence to master this technology.
I will be permanently moving to Europe with my family soon. Simplilearn's course has helped me bag a great job offer there with 60% salary hike. We cannot wait to start our new life in Finland. We are all so excited. Hey, I am Salahuddin Quadra, and I am currently living in Algeria. I'm working as Chief Information Technology Officer at Iris Tires. After working for 23 years in IT sector in Algeria, I felt that my career had become stagnant here. I wanted to experience what it's like to live in Europe, so I started applying to various jobs there. As someone who is responsible for making a decision, I wanted to upgrade my skills. I also realized that to get a new job, I needed to have a professional certification in cloud computing. So last year, I started the postgraduate program in cloud computing in association with Caltech from Simplilearn. It's not easy to get access to Caltech, but Simplilearn provided that with this course, I had the choice to study while I continued with my job. I learned technologies like AWS and Azure during the course. Luckily, my new employers were looking for someone who knew these technologies. I have just completed the course, but my new employers were aware that I was taking this course. And that is how I got this new job offer with 60% salary hike. In Finland, I will be leading the cloud computing unit of my new company. I am really excited, not just for myself, but for my family as well. I have 3 daughters. I think I will be able to help them with their higher studies in Europe. As a father, you always want to make decisions that have a positive impact on your children. As for me, I am going to live my dream now. I think dreams come true when you work hard to achieve them.
Also, don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to stay updated with all the latest content from Simplilearn.
In this video, we'll go through Azure Machine Learning in detail, including its capabilities, the Azure ecosystem that supports machine learning, and the various ways we train and build models, starting with what is Azure Machine Learning, followed by who is machine learning for. Then we will look into its infrastructure, readiness, and security. Then we will dive into machine learning project workflow. Following that, we will understand MLOps, DevOps for machine learning. And at last, we will explore the Azure Machine Learning Studio. After that, we will have a demo too. So without doing any further delay, let's start with the video. So what is Azure Machine Learning? Azure Machine Learning is a cloud solution that helps you speed up and manage your machine learning projects. It can be used by machine learning specialists, data scientists, and engineers in their daily workflows. Models are trained and deployed, and MLOps are managed. You can use an open source platform like PyTorch, TensorFlow, or scikit-learn to build a model, or use one created in Azure Machine Learning. Model monitoring, retraining, and redeployment are all made easier using these tools. But this brings us to a question that who exactly machine learning is for? So individuals and teams deploying MLOps inside their company can use Azure Machine Learning to move machine learning models into production in a safe and auditable environment. Data scientists and machine learning experts will find tools to help them speed up and automate their daily tasks. Tools for embedding models into applications or services will be available to application developers. Platform developers will find a strong set of tools for constructing advanced ML technology underpinned by resilient Azure Resource Manager APIs. Now that we know the basics of Azure ML, let's have a look at its infrastructure readiness and security. So Azure Machine Learning is an Azure cloud platform that adds security to machine learning projects. So integrations for security include the following: network security groups in Azure Virtual Networks. Azure Key Vault is a vault where you may store security secrets like storage, account, access details, and set up an Azure Container Registry behind a VNet. So now let's dive down deep and explore its project workflow. Models are usually created as a part of project with a specific goal and objective. Multiple people are usually involved in these projects. Iterative development is used while experimenting with data, algorithms, and models. Now coming to the project life cycle, while the project lifespan will differ depending on the project, it will typically look like this. A workspace organizes a project and facilitates collaboration among multiple users who are all working toward the same goal. Users in a workspace may easily share the result of their experiments through the Studio user interface, or they can use versioned assets for jobs like environments and storage references. So users' work can be automated in a machine learning pipeline and activated on a timetable or HTTPs request when a project is ready for operation. Therefore, models can be deployed to the managed inferencing solution in real time or batch, abstracting away the infrastructure management that is traditionally necessary for model deployment. Now let's proceed further and understand the concept of MLOps, that is DevOps for machine learning. MLOps or DevOps for machine learning is a process for generating models for production use. If not reproducible, the lifetime of a model from training to deployment must be auditable. MLOps or machine learning operations is based on DevOps principles and methods to improve workflow efficiency. Continuous integration, delivery, and deployment, for example. These ideas are applied to the machine learning process by MLOps with the purpose of experimentation and model deployment can be done more quickly, and quality assurance and end-to-end lineage tracking are more efficient ways to put models into production. Now, let's explore what is Azure ML Studio. So, Azure Machine Learning Studio is an online service that includes low-code and no-code alternatives for project development and asset management in Azure Machine Learning. Basically, it is a workspace where you can create, build, train the machine learning models. For an inclusive data science platform, the studio integrates no-code and code-first experience. So now that we have covered all the important concepts of Azure Machine Learning, let's have a demo for a better understanding of how machine learning is used in Azure. So let's start with a demo. First, you need to browse the link studio.azureml.net, and here you need to log in with your Azure account. So once you have logged in, you will be led to a new window. This is the new window. Here you can see a few options. So let's start and see one by one what these options are. So the first one is projects. Basically, this gives you a list of all the experiments that you have already worked on. So here you can see we haven't worked on any experiment yet. Then comes experiment. Experiments are all the programs and codes that you have worked on to create it or deploy a model that you have just created for an experiment. So as I said, we haven't created any experiment yet, so the list is null over here. When you click on samples, you can see a few sample experiments provided to you by Azure portal by default. And following that, we have web services. So we all know, since Azure is a cloud computing platform, so all the data gathered from our experiments needs to be uploaded to the cloud. So web services gives you a list of all the experiments that you have in the cloud, so you can access them from anywhere. So when you create an experiment and work on it, when you add it to the cloud, that data is stored here. So then comes data sets. It gives you all the data sets you have in your Azure portal. When you click on the samples option, again you can see all the data sets provided to you by default in your Azure portal. Then comes trained models. So while working on an experiment, you will come across a point where you need to train your model. So basically, this gives you a list of all the models that you have trained in your experiments or Azure programs. And in the last comes settings. Any changes that you want to make to your workspace is done under settings. Here you can see this is your workspace name, workspace description, which is by default, and all the details is provided here only. So whatever changes you want to make to your workspace, you will be doing this over here. So now let's start with a demo. So down below you can see the add or new option here. So click on it, and then you can see there are a few templates provided to you by Azure itself. So we'll click on blank experiment. Once you click on the blank experiments, you'll be guided to a new experiment window. So this is the new window, and this window is divided into three parts. These are the components where you will plan your model. This is the canvas to design your model, and then the properties of the model. In the components section, you can see samples already present there. So you can select any one of them according to your requirement. So here, when I'm typing samples, I'll work on airport codes datasets. So I just need to drag this option over here. But before starting with our experiment, let's change the name. So here I'm changing it to airport codes demo model. So now you can see the name of the experiment is changed. Now when you click on it and select visualize, just a second, you can see the number of rows and columns provided to it, the data which is required for its dataset to be created and for its model to be created. So the 4 columns are airport ID, city, state and name. Now we will move towards the part where we define the field we need to make our predictions for. So type columns in the search bar. Under manipulation section, you can see there are multiple options provided to you. So here we will select columns and data sets, as we are working on data sets. Now connect your data set with this option. So you can see a red alert over here. So when you click on it, you can see it is asking for values in your dataset. So to add values, click on the Launch Column Selector under Properties section. So once you click on it, here you need to select all the options needed for your required values. So for my experiment model, I need all these datasets. So I'll add all of these and then click on the Save option. So let me just add these. So now I have saved all the values I need in my dataset. So now you can see the alert is gone. So now we have the datasets that we want to work on. So let's look for an appropriate algorithm for it. So while looking into the classification algorithm, we know that so here you can see it under classification model, we have these options. So we know that our target value is divided into 2 classifications. So the algorithm we will be using is a 2-class. So we will be using 2-class booster decision tree because it calculates the accuracy for every node, and once the calculated accuracy is more than our required accuracy, then only it moves to the next node. So basically this gives you a prediction value close to the accurate value of the model. So we will just drag this option over here. So now the next step we have is to train our model. So we just need to type train over here and select train model option. So just drag it to the canvas. Now connect the 2 booster decision tree to the train model. Now you can again see the red alert for required data, as it doesn't have any data to work on. So our next step is to split the data. So we'll type split and drag the split data option on our canvas. As you can see, this is also saying it needs an input port data set. So we'll connect our data set with it so that it is provided with the data. So when you click on it, you can see it is asking for a split percentage. So you split the data into training and testing, where 80% goes to training and 20% to testing. So we will mention 0.08 over here, and so now we will just connect the 80% data to the train model. As we said, the 80% goes for training. But you can still see the alert in the train model because it is not aware of the column it needs to train on. So we will click on launch column selector. Now you just need to select all the columns you need to work on. So I'm selecting the airport ID number. Now you can see once I save it that the alert is gone. Now our next step is to find the score of our model. So let's type score in our search bar and drag the score model over here. Let me just reduce the size of the canvas. Yeah. So we will just connect our train model to the score model. So again you will see the red alert as it doesn't know the data it needs to test on. So for that we will connect the remaining testing data in the split data option to the score model. Now you can see the alert option is gone. Now coming to the final step, that is evaluation of the model. So let's type evaluation, and here you can see the evaluate model option. We just need to drag it to the canvas. Yeah. So let's connect it with our score model. Now your model for the airport code dataset is complete. So this is the whole model. Now you need to save the model and then click on run option. So here I've saved it, and you can see it's running. You can see the model running and going through every node. As you can see the green mark as it's verifying through every node. So once it's done, click on evaluate model and then click on visualize. Now you can see the accuracy is 98. Here you can see the accuracy is 98, which is almost the prediction value. Now you can see the positive and negative labels as well. So this whole data is known as confusion matrix. Now for the values close to the positive label, it gives me the number of true predictions. That the number of data I'll provide, it shows that 72 predictions will be right and 1 will be wrong. Now let's go back and run this model over the web. So by clicking on setup web service, we will click on predictive web service. Now we will just connect web service input to the score model. So that once the program is uploaded to the cloud, it is directly connected to the score model and gives us the output. So now you need to save this and run. This will execute the entire model. Now, all we are left with is deploying the model. Now, we just need to click on deploy web service. So then you will see you will be taken to a new window. Here you can see the response page where it's showing the test option. You need to click on it. So here you can see a new window has popped up. So you just need to mention the details. Like for city I am mentioning Bangalore. For state I am mentioning Karnataka. And name of the airport is Kempagoda International Airport. And I just need to save this data. So now down below you can see it gives me predictive values, and this is the airport ID for my mentioned details. So the accuracy of this ID will be 0.98, which is 98%, which is almost accurate to the 100%. So this was our experiment, and this is how we can use ML in Azure.
What is Azure Active Directory? Now, here we are in a situation where we have two colleagues having a conversation with each other. So one of them complains that he is finding a hard time managing multiple user logins at the same time. His friend suggests that he has a solution, that the company start using Azure Active Directory. He says that with Azure AD, they'll be able to handle multiple user logins without any issue. So just like the question in all our minds, the friend asks, how is Azure Active Directory going to help us? So to help you understand, let's think about a scenario. Now you're an employee working for an organization and you want to use a particular service, in this case SQL database. So you're assigned a set of username and password. Then you want to use another service, a machine learning service. Again, you're assigned a different username and password. And likewise for any number of services that you want to use. So for every service that you're going to choose, you need to be assigned a new username and password. But this becomes a huge issue for the administrator as they have to handle a large number of username and passwords. Now, if you think about a large organization where there's more than 1,000 people working, you can understand how much of a hassle it's going to be for the administrator. At the same time, it's also a really difficult thing for you to remember that many numbers of username and passwords. It's difficult on the user as well. And that's where Azure Active Directory helps. Now, here's a scenario where we're applying Azure Active Directory. Now you're an employee, you want to use a particular service, and you're assigned a single username and password. And with this username and password, you can access all the services that you want. So there's only one set of username and passwords that you need to remember. You can use any of the services that you want as long as the administrator has given you access to it. So what is Azure Active Directory? Now Azure Active Directory is a service that falls under the identity domain. It allows multiple users and is a cloud-based directory and identity management service. Now, here's an ideal scenario. You're joining an office newly, the admin helps you sign up to whatever services you want, and you can access these services anywhere over the cloud. So now let's talk about something different, Windows AD and Azure AD. Now, Windows AD was the previous version of Azure AD. So now we'll talk about why we needed to change from Windows Active Directory to Azure Active Directory. So what is Windows Active Directory? Now it's an OS directory service which allows you to work with multiple systems, multiple network resources in a unified manner. Now the biggest draw when it came to Windows AD was that it had many layers. Now different layers that did different bits of work. So now let's talk about each of these layers. The first layer is ADDS, or the Windows Active Directory Domain Services. Now each layer, as I said before, has a different role to perform. ADDS allows admin to manage information relating to user logins and other details like when they signed up, how much they're using and things like that. The next layer is ADLS, or the Azure Data Lake Storage Services. This layer is for allowing you to store any amounts of data of any type or size. Then you have the ADFS, or the Active Directory Federation Services, where you're given a single option for sign up, with which you get access to all systems and applications. Then we have the fourth layer, the ADCS, or the Active Directory and Certification Services. This enables administrators to customize services and then be able to manage and issue public certificates. And the final layer is ADRMS, or the Active Directory Rights Management Service, and this is used for data protection. Now, here's where Azure Active Directory changed the whole game. This means that there's a large number of layers that administrators need to take care of. Now, how about there was a solution for this? And Azure AD is that solution. Azure Active Directory integrates all these 5 layers into 2. And these are the Windows Azure Active Directory, or the WAAD, where it combines all the problems when it comes to identification management, which is almost all 5 layers taken into one. And the Windows Azure Access Control Service enables the federation or the division of all these services of an organization. And by division, I mean assigning each of these services to these users. So that is taken care of by the Windows Azure Access Control Service. Hence, Azure Active Directory is able to simplify a lot of the problems that Windows Azure Active Directory had. For example, the application Office 365 uses Azure Active Directory to manage user identities. Here's how. Now, you're an employee who wants to access one of the Office 365 services, which could be Excel, PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, or something like that. So you go talk to the administrator and he gives you access to these services with the help of a single username and password. Now, as long as you have this username and password and the administrator has given you access to it, you can use any of these services. So who's the service audience? Who is using the Active Directory service? Now, there are 3 types of audience when it comes to Azure Active Directory. The first one is IT administrator, the second one application developers, and online customers. So the IT administrators, their main emphasis is to ensure that the sign-in takes place. They take care of all the sign-in procedures. They also solve issues when it comes to authentication. For example, to authenticate a particular user, the problem is solved by the IT administrators. Then you have application developers who use these services to develop applications. And with this, they have an easier time developing applications as all these resources are easily available. You have online customers who make use of services like Office 365 and other CRM services and have all their demands catered immediately. So now let's have a look at how we can use Azure Active Directory to provide access to a particular individual. So if you log into the Azure account, this is what you see, or you go into Active Directory, a list of all the people who are using or have been given permission to use resources from Azure. Okay, now we're going to create a profile. We need to set up his name, which is John, and second name, Jacob. Now for properties, we need to determine the source of authority, which is already the Active Directory, so that's fine. We can select a group or add them to a particular group if we feel like it. Now, if we add them to a particular group, it means that they have access to all the resources that everyone in the group has access to earlier. So we'll do that later. We'll select their directory role, or we can select it here if we need to. It could be user, administrator, or a limited administrator. And now we'll set up a password. We already got one and we'll create. And that's it. We have created a user. Now we'll go to their profile. So what we can see here is that you have access to every bit of detail related to this account. So you have the name, your first name, the username, the object ID, job info, everything. You can even have other details like how often they've signed in, when did they sign up. You can check their password, you can reset the password, delete their account, and so much more. Now we can even add a directory role, which we saw earlier. And now let's add this person to the admin group. So, he gets access to all the services that those people have access to. And select. That's it. We've added them. Now the other things that you can see here, there are applications, licenses, devices. These are all restrictions you can add or remove, like which device you can use the system through or with and stuff like that. So that's it. And with that, we've created a user and given him access to certain services. Why should you be interested in Data Factory? Now let's consider a scenario. So here we have 2 colleagues having a conversation with each other, and they say that the data that they're generating from their applications or products is increasing exponentially. Now, considering that this data is coming from a number of different products, it'll be a bit of a task to analyze and store all of this data. So he wonders how they're going to manage that. His friend suggests that they use Azure's Data Factory. Now, what does Azure's Data Factory actually do? First, it stores data with the help of the data lake storage. Now, any kind of data can be stored in the data lake storage. Then you can analyze the data, you can transform the data with the help of pipelines, and you can publish the organized data. You can visualize the data with third-party applications like Apache Spark or Hadoop as well. Now, what exactly is Data Factory? So now let's have a look at what exactly is Data Factory. Now, Data Factory falls under the identity domain of services in the Azure catalog and is a cloud-based integration service. Basically, what it does is it works on your data, it stores your data, it orchestrates and automates the movement or transformation of data. It works heavily on the data that you store. Now, let's see how it actually works or how the flow of its processes are. Firstly, we have the input data set, which is nothing but the data that you have within your data store, the one that you need processed. Then you pass this data through a pipeline. Now, what does a pipeline do? A pipeline basically performs an operation on the data that transforms it, which could be anything from just data movement or some data transformation. Now, data transformation is possible with the help of USQL, some stored procedures, or Hive. Now, after this is done, you get an output dataset. Now, this output dataset will contain data that is in a structured form because it's already been transformed and made structured in the pipeline stage. Then it is given into linked services like Azure Data Lake, block storage, or SQL. Now, what it does is these store information that is very important when it comes to connecting to an external source. Now, this is, if you wanted an example, how in an SQL server you need to mention the source and destination of your data. Now, for example, consider an SQL server. So you need a connection string so that you can connect to an external device. You need to mention the source and the destination of your data. This is how the link services work. And finally, you need a gateway. Now, a gateway basically connects your on-premises data to the cloud. So you do need a client installed on your on-premises system so that you can connect to the Azure cloud. And finally, you have the cloud. Here what happens is your data can be analyzed or visualized with a number of different analytical softwares like Apache Spark, R, Hadoop, and so on. So all this time I've been mentioning that data lake is a very important part when it comes to Azure Data Factory's proper functioning. So now let's talk about what exactly is data lake. Now, data lake is a data storage or a file system which is highly scalable and distributed. It is located in the cloud and works with multiple analytics frameworks, which is external frameworks like Hadoop, Apache, and so on. So now let's have a look at it. So first you have your output data set, which is data from the mobile, video, web, social media, so much more. It is sent into the Azure Data Lake store. And then it is provided to external frameworks like R, Apache, and Spark so that they can be worked on. Now, there are two main concepts when it comes to data lake storage. So one of them is storage and the other one is analytics. Now, storage is of unlimited size. It can be petabytes, terabytes, gigabytes, and so much more. It stores a wide variety of data. It could be unstructured or structured data, and it can store really large files. And another concept when it comes to data lake is analytics. Now, how it works. Now, here are two examples of how analytics works when it comes to data lake. Now, when it comes to analytics, you can monitor and diagnose real-time data. For example, data that you're getting from vehicles or buildings. These can be used to optimize how they work, respond to certain events, or generate alerts in case something goes wrong. Then you can also identify fraudulent transactions on your credit card, or you can identify the geographical position of your card. Perhaps monitor how many transactions have been taking place on that card, and so on. So now we're going to have a look at how we can use the Azure Data Factory to move data from an SQL database to a blob storage on the cloud. So here's what we're going to do. So first off, to make a database, what you're going to need is software known as SSMS. So you can find it on Google. You just need to Google it, SSMS. The first link you can take here, and there you have it. So you just need to click here and download the file. So I've already downloaded the file. So basically this is used to create a database which we'll be transferring to the blob storage. So this will take about, depending on your computer speed, pretty long or little to no time. I've already downloaded it. The process is very simple. Just directly go on saying yes, yes. And finally, once the installation is done, here's what we're going to do. We should go into the dashboard of Microsoft Azure. we need to create a data warehouse. So we'll go into all resources, create resource, go to database and select SQL data warehouse. There we have it. Now it's very important that you remember the names of the service of everything that you're going to write here, because each of these become very important later on. So I've already set up a possible set of names. YouTube, it's free trial, the resource is already created, a blank database, the server, we need to create a new one. So we'll name it as YouTube server, YouTube admin as the server admin login, the password as alright, the location does not matter. Okay, that's done. Now here the server is done, and here we need to change how much you want the lowest, how much computation you want, how much the workload, how important your workload is. So we'll put it at the lowest since we don't require much. We'll apply, the rest is normal, and create. So now we're creating an SQL data warehouse, so we'll wait. So now the deployment is done, so we'll go to the notification and go to the resource. Here, now this is done, so we'll go to the SSMS, which I've already opened here, and then go here and copy this, paste it here, SQL authentication, login, which details we have already stored here, which is admin, YouTube admin, and the password, which is also given there. Right, go to options, we go to the database name, which is YouTube, everything else is there. We need to change it to TCP IP and connect. We sign in. We'll add the password. Again, we're going to sign in now. Right. So now that that's completed, you can see that this is what will pop up. So this is the name of the server we've given, as you saw earlier. You go to databases, and here you have the YouTube database that we just created. Right click this and add a new query. I already have a code for this program. It's a very simple program, so copying and pasting this. Now, if you need the code for this program, let us know in the comments below. It's very simple. What we're doing is creating a table called demo tab with first name Clark Kent and last name is Bruce Wayne, and the table that's created will have these two rows. So now we're going to execute this. There you have it. Two rows have been affected. So now let's have a look at our table. Execute this line, and there you go. The table's here. So now that this is done, we're going back into Azure, and we need to create a storage account. So that's where the blob storage is going to happen. So we're going to storage accounts and click on add. So here it's a free trial. The resource group is YouTube. Storage account name is Store. That's all. Okay. US performance is standard. General purpose can do locally since we don't need it to be very reliable, at least for this one. Advanced is fine. View and create. That's done, and we create. Now we'll wait for the deployment to finish. And that's it. The deployment is done. So we'll go to the resource and go to blobs. So this is where the storage is happening. We need to create a blob. Simply blob, which does not exist. And okay, it has been created. Now for the next bit, we need to create the data factory now. So we go to all services, search for data factory. We press add. So here we'll free trial, use existing, which we have YouTube, East US, and create. So now we've created a new data factory. Now we'll wait while it's being deployed. So now it's created. So we'll go here, and here we click on copy data, and this opens up. We'll name it. Our description, run once now. Okay. Right, so we press next. So we need to connect to a data source. So what you need to do is select Azure SQL data warehouse. So one second, go to previous. Here we select Azure SQL data warehouse. Go here, search for source, Azure subscription, free trial, here YouTube server, and the database is YouTube. You also need to provide your username and password. I've saved it here. YouTube admin. Right. Okay, now we can select the table, which is demo tab. Next. And now for our destination. So where are we going to connect this to? We're going to Azure Blob Storage. Next. Destination. Azure subscription free trial and Simply Store. Now we need to name our storage path. Next. All of this can be passed on. So here's what we're doing. We're copying whatever is inside this to the Azure Blob Storage. That's what's happening right now. All of that is set. And next. It's validating and we'll wait now. It's registering connections, creating database, and in the end it's creating a pipeline. So you can monitor the pipeline from here if you feel like it. Now, here's what we're going to find. So here's the visual representation of what's happening. It's being copied into the blob storage. Now let's have a look if it's actually worked out. We go to our database. We'll go into storage accounts, simply store, go to blobs. We've created a new one, and there you have it. So based on the container that you've named there, it's created a new one here. So actually I had earlier created the name called simply blob, but as you can see here, as long as you name a container, it'll create a folder inside which you will find your particular thing that you copied. And that's it, you've copied data. Similarly, you can do a number of multiple operations on this container, on the pipeline you just created with the data factory. And that's that.
Now we know what Azure is and its key benefits. Let's now move on to Azure Virtual Machine. Before that, let's consider a scenario. Rachel had to host 10 virtual machines at once for a project. There was an issue when her computer RAM was not compatible with the instances. The computer RAM was only 8 GB and the instances that required were 10 GB. Then she says, I wish there is a service that's cost effective and also provides extra RAM memory. One of her colleagues heard this and he comes up with an idea. He says, can we use Azure Virtual Machine? It has a pay-as-you-go pricing and has disks for storage. You can pay for what you use and create any number of instances with high storage capacity. Also, if any technical difficulty arises, you can easily retrieve the files through the backup server. So now she's happy and she wants to know more about Azure Virtual Machine. Azure Virtual Machine is one of the wide range of services that Azure offers to create your instance. A virtual machine is a computer file, typically called an image, which behaves like an actual computer. It runs in a window, giving the user the same experience on a virtual machine as they have on the host operating system itself. Multiple virtual machines can run simultaneously on the same physical computer. Each virtual machine provides its own hardware, like CPUs, memories, and other devices. Azure Virtual Machine offers a high range of flexibility and it maintains the physical hardware that runs on it. Let me explain some of the benefits of Azure Virtual Machine. First, we have easy development and test. Azure Virtual Machine has a quick and easy way to configure the computer that is required to code and test an application. Next, agility and scale. Azure Virtual Machine is agile and the ability to clone and spin up multiple instances of the same virtual machine allows us to scale services and applications rapidly, efficiently, and very cost effectively. Azure Virtual Machine provides enhanced performance. Demands for applications can fluctuate, so you pay for the virtual machines you need and shut down the unnecessary ones to save the cost. Azure Virtual Machines provide extended data center and can be easily connected to an organization's network.
It is easy to set up your redundant infrastructure on Azure, and Azure provides a full disaster recovery site at a fraction of the cost. Furthermore, let me explain Azure Virtual Machine components in details. Virtual Machine comes under the compute domain of Azure. It also offers various services like availability sets, snapshots, disks, images, and many other services like hosts. Virtual Machine can be clubbed with other services like disks, images, availability sets, hosts, and many more. So, the first component and the most important component is the operating system. The operating system creates connections to the remote desktop session host. There are many operating systems available like Ubuntu, Red Hat, Linux, Windows Server, CentOS. You can also set the operating disk size so that the memory is not wasted. The next component is disks. Azure virtual machines use attached virtual hard disks for storage. There are two types of virtual hard disks. First is an image. It is a template for creation of new Azure virtual machine. Then we have disks. It is a bootable virtual hard disk. All durable disks are backed up by page blobs in Azure storage. Therefore, the disks inherit the benefits of blob storage, high availability, durability, and many more. The disks are mounted as drives on the VM. The next component is virtual network. Many components operate the virtual machines in a scalable and secure manner. Virtual networks could include equipment such as separate network spaces for internet-facing and backend servers, load balancers, firewalls, and more. Many of these components are deployed into an Azure Virtual Network. Azure Virtual Network provides many features such as subnet, IP address, load balancer, and network security group. Another important component of Azure Virtual Machine is availability sets. If in case there's a slight chance there could be a failure in physical servers, then these come into picture. So in case of such failure, the Azure platform will migrate the failed virtual machine to a healthy host to reconstitute the VM. It is highly recommended to deploy at least 2 instances of the virtual machine, and virtual machines placed on an availability set perform identical set of functionalities. Now that we know what Azure Virtual Machine is, let's look into the demo. In this demo, first we are going to create a virtual machine, connect it, and then create a web server and modify the web server, and finally launch the web application. So let's go ahead into the demo now. So the first step is to log into Microsoft Azure with your credentials. Now let's click on virtual machines and create a new one. So I can put add, and you can use the subscription you want, either pay as you go pricing or free tier. Resource group will create a new one, that is payroll 1. Okay, virtual machine we can create. I'm going to use VM web 001, and then region I'll be using East US. Then image I'll be using Windows Server R2 data center. Size I'll be using B1MS. Select username root admin, and then password of your choice. And then I'm going to allow selected ports and choose RDP3389 and next. So OS step I'll be using standard HDD, and then next. So I can see a default virtual network and a default subnet and public IP as well as default. Then next. You can allow for auto shutdown, but again, it's entirely your choice. I'm going to select an extension to install, and I'm going to install Microsoft Anti-Malware. Create, okay. I'm going to create a few tags now. Let's go ahead with it. So I've created 5 tags. Now review plus create. Okay, so everything seems good. Let's create now. So the deployment is going to take a few minutes. Let's wait for it. Okay, so that's done. Now let's go to virtual machine and see our virtual machine. Okay, so it's been deployed. Now let's get into the virtual machine and copy the IP address. Then hit Windows plus R and open MSTSE and paste the IP address and connect. Let's use a different account. You have to use the administrator account that we created before with the same password. Click OK. Now the remote desktop session host opens. The next step is to click on Server Manager and add rules and features. Click on Next. Select role-based or feature-based installation and click on Next. Then select the virtual machine you've created and Next. And then we are going to select Web Server IIS. Next. Next. Okay, so it's already installed on my computer, but you have to install this. Then let's close this and open Internet Explorer. Let's type in HTTP localhost. Yeah, so now we can see the default browser opening. Let's minimize this and let's try it here. Here you have to just put the IP address. I think there's an issue. Okay, so let's add an inbound port. Networking, select networking and add inbound port. Let's move port 80 and add. Okay, so it's added. Now let's go and refresh it. Now we can see the default web browser opening. So the next step is to modify the web browser. Let's go ahead with that. Go back to your remote session host. Let's go to File Explorer. So certain folders are created in the C drive. Let's open that. It would be under inetpub. So this is where the default browser is coming from. Now let's make a new text document. Open that and put hello, welcome to this demo by Simplilearn. Save it, close it. Let's rename this as index.html. So this is a text document, so we need to change that. Okay, let's remove this. Okay, that's done. Now let's go back to our Internet Explorer and hit F5. Let's refresh this. Let's try now. Okay, so let's... Yeah, so it's done. Now let's go back to the previous browser and try. Let's refresh. Yeah, that's done.
If you're craving a more hands-on and detailed approach to Azure, Simplilearn's Caltech postgraduate program in cloud computing is the perfect fit for you. Click the link in the description to explore more about this course.
First of all, let's look into why is Azure Virtual Network important. So why Azure Virtual Network is required? So somewhere far away at an office, a company was struggling with few challenges. The company got a bigger projects which lead to the following challenges. That includes poor network connectivity, time-consuming process in building network topologies, could not divert network traffic to its destination on time. So these were a couple of challenges the company was facing. So the employees thought that what could be the possible solution to these challenges? And then we require the Azure Virtual Network in that case. So first of all, let's understand what is Azure Virtual Network is. An Azure VNet or a virtual network represents your network or environment to run VMS and applications in the cloud. When it is created, the services and virtual machines within the network interact securely with each over the internet. So virtual network, you can consider it as a virtual cloud, which is basically kind of a cloud space virtually assigned to the users or to the organization, which they can dedicatedly use for their purpose. So for example, if you have to create some instances or virtual machines onto the Azure cloud and you want to connect it with the on-prem servers, for example, then you might require the virtual network in that case. Let's assume that those instances that are created in the virtual network require the range of IP addresses that you want to allocate to them. And that is something you can customize using the Azure Virtual Network. How do you want that the traffic should be routed to your instances in the virtual network? How the firewall securities should be applied? Everything the end user can control in the virtual network. So it seems like that you are working in your own data center. Ideally, you would be working onto the Azure cloud using the virtual network. Now, what are the advantages of using the Azure Virtual Network? So a couple of them are, it provides an isolated environment for your application. So as I said that, it seems like that you are working in your on-prem environment. That means within your data center. But ideally, it is a virtual space that is allocated to you, which is a kind of an isolated environment that is specifically designed for your task and the activities. Generally, a subnet in a VNet can access the public internet by default. So we create a subnet inside the virtual network which can access the public internet. So there is a public network connectivity that is enabled in the virtual net so that a subnet which will be created in the VNet can be accessed. Traffic can be easily filtered from different resources. So you can have some control lists defined, you can have some security groups created, and how do you want to allow the traffic onto the servers or the application? That is something which you can control. It is a highly secure network and the security groups and the policies are basically implemented by the end user. So you can design how the security should be implemented. High network connectivity, so you have a higher bandwidth as compared to the normal internet connection you might be having in the data center. Compared to that, you use the Azure network only, which gives you the higher network connectivity. It builds sophisticated network topologies in a simple manner and which is easily manageable, as well as there are less troubleshooting issues that we would encounter. Now, what are the components of Azure Virtual Network? One of them is the subnets. Then you have routing. Then you have network security groups. Now, what do we mean by subnets? The subnet is one of the major or a prime important component in the virtual network. So what you have to do is, first obviously you would be creating a virtual network. Inside that you can create the subnets. Subnets, you can consider it a logical partitioning or virtual partitioning inside the virtual network. Subnet lets user segment the virtual network into one or more subnetworks. For example, let's assume that you're working in an organization, and in the organization there are different departments. For every department there should be some set of IP addresses that you want to allocate to the machines that the employees are using, or all the departments should be isolated. That means that they should have their own network IDs and the network addresses allocated to their machines. And in that case, what you would do is you would create the subnets and the subnet IDs that would be allocated to those departments. These subnetworks can be separated logically, and each subnet consists of a server. So what you do is, when you create a subnet, you can create a server or an instance inside that subnet, and how do you want to give an access to that instance depends on criteria or the requirement. Hence, a subnet can further be divided into two parts, one as the public subnet and the other one as the private subnet. These are the naming conventions of the subnet. Then how do you want to give the internet connectivity depends on how the public subnet should be interacting with the internet. And for the private subnet, as the name suggests, that the internet is blocked. So that means it is completely isolated in the virtual network. The private instances, though, if you want that any instance created in the private subnet should have the internet connectivity or an access, you can primarily go with the NAT gateways in that case, which is a network address translation or kind of a translator which converts the private to public and vice versa. And that would actually enable the internet connectivity to your subnets. Then in the public instances, they can directly access the instance. As the name suggests, public instances, that public subnets, that means they have the direct internet connectivity. Next component is routing, and the routing is primarily a routing rules, you can say, that are applied, and those are actually applied to the routers only. So since on the cloud we cannot have a direct router access, and hence using the routing as a component, we can define some routing rules which are directly applied to the router in the infrastructure. It delivers the data by choosing a suitable path from source to destination. For each subnet, Azure Virtual Network automatically routes traffic and creates a route table. When you create a virtual network, automatically a route table is created, and that basically is required to route the traffic, and that can be used by every subnet. That doesn't mean that you only have to create a single route table in the virtual network. You can have multiple route tables also created, which can be associated with different subnets as well. Then you have the network security groups. It is kind of a firewall that protects the virtual machine by limiting the network traffic. It restricts inbound and outbound network traffic depending upon the destination IP address port and the protocol. So it is basically the network security group sits on the instances and or virtual machines, and they basically define that how the traffic should be reaching to the ports onto the virtual machine. So how do you want to open up the ports, and for which IP addresses you want to open up the ports? That is something the end user or the administrator has to specify or design. So they act as a kind of a firewall rules only that protects the virtual machines. So how to launch an instance using Azure VNet? So first of all, you have to create a virtual network. So virtual network act as a container for subnets. So first thing is that you would be creating a virtual network. Then you would be creating subnets which are considered as a subset within the virtual network. So cloud instances included in the subnet. So first VNets are created, then the subnets are created, and then you configure the properties in the security group. Have a look at this in detail. Now with respect to the virtual network, what you need to do is you have to create a virtual network in the Azure cloud. Then you have to create subnets into each virtual network, which is kind of a subset of a virtual network. So you can create one as a public subnet, the other one as a private subnet, for example. Now you have to assign instances. So when you create an instance, you have to specify that what is the virtual network, for which virtual network you are creating an instance. Within that virtual network, you have to select that on which particular subnet the instance should be created, and then connect instance to a relevant network security group. So attach your network security group to the instances, and based on the properties or the rules that are defined in the network security group, that will be applied to the instances within the subnets. Finally, configure the properties in the network security and set the policies. As a result, you will be able to launch your instance on Azure within the virtual network. Now we will be seeing one demo that how we can create Azure Virtual Network subnets and the network security group. So just be there to watch our demo on the Azure Virtual Network. In today's session, I would be showing how you can create the virtual networks onto the Azure. And for that, you require the credentials on Microsoft Azure, and here you can see on my screen that I have already logged in into the Azure console. Now what you need to do is, in order to search virtual network, you can type and search in the dashboard, in the search bar, with respect to the virtual networks. And here you can find the virtual network and the gateways. So what you need to do is you just have to click on the virtual networks, and then it will give you the options to add the components inside the virtual networks. So let me first open up the virtual network. Right. Now, in theory, we discussed that the virtual network comprises of multiple components and subcomponents. So primarily is that first you have to create a virtual network. Then you have to assign the IPv4 CIDR block to the virtual network. And then you create the subnets inside the network, which is a subset of the virtual network. Along with that, you define the routing rules. And likewise, you create the instances inside the subnets that will be part of the virtual networks. So that's what we are going to do in this demo. So I would be adding up a new virtual network. So you can see here there are already two virtual networks that have been added. One is the demo VNet, which is by default. So when you created the Azure credentials, the demo virtual network was already created by the Azure so that it can provide you the default settings. And then the test one has been created by me, and that's the customized one, or you can say a non-default virtual network. So I'm going to add another VNet and would define the name to it. So let's wait for the details to appear. So here you have to define the virtual network to create. Obviously we will be going with the free trial only. And then you have to create a resource group. So what is a resource group? It is primarily a collection of resources that share the same lifecycle, permissions, and the policies. So if you have a resource group created, you can use it. Otherwise, you can create a new resource group. So I already have one. That is the demo one. I would be using that. In the instance details, you have to specify the name of the virtual network. So these are certain parameters that you have to go with while defining the name. So let's say I put something like test VNet as the virtual network that I want to create, and that is you have to select a region where you want to get that created. So these are the available regions that you can select. I would go with US East US only, and then we have to define the IP addresses also. So in the IP addresses, the CIDR blocks are allocated to the virtual networks, and that becomes a fixed IP address for that VNet. So what you can do is you can specify a range of IP addresses. Now whenever we talk about a virtual network and the IP addresses, we primarily focus on the private IPs only. So this is the private IP that we are actually talking about. So I can reserve some IP address CIDR for our VNet, and that is the range of 40.0.0.0/16 I'm going to reserve. So now we'll create one subnet, and we'll name that subnet. So as we discussed, that subnets are the subcomponents of the VNet. So here you can see we have already created one subnet with the name public subnet. So likewise we can add another subnet also, and let's name it to something like demo subnet. Right, and the subnet should have the IP address range, and that IP address range should be part of the VNet only. In V18, so same subnet address range you would be defining in the subnet as well. So that will be 40.0.1. or we can select 2.0/24. The rest of the things would be default. We are not attaching any route table as of now. So just click on OK, and here you can see that the subnet is created. Now once the subnet is created, now we are going to create a virtual machine inside that subnet, and for that we'll go to the search bar and here we'll type virtual machines. Now we'll create a virtual machine in the same VNet, that is the test VNet, and inside the demo subnet, so that our virtual machine gets the private IP address from the subnet that has been created in the VNet itself. So what you need to do is you have to open up the virtual machines, click on add, and here you should add a new virtual machine. So you should select the name of the virtual machine and the network details where we would be defining the VNet as well as the subnet where the virtual machine should be created. So in the subscription we'll go with the free tier, and in the resource group we'll go with the demo that has already been created. We'll put a virtual machine name, something like test VM, and the rest of the things will be default. So we'll quickly skip the disk check also. Now in the networking, we would be selecting the test VNet as our virtual network, and in the subnet, we would be selecting the demo subnet. So that is the recently one added in the test VNet, and we want that our virtual machine should be part of that subnet only. Now obviously, since we are creating a virtual machine, so it should be part of, it should have the public IP also assigned, since from the public network we need to access those virtual machines. So we'll keep it enabled, right? And the next would be the default settings that we are going to proceed with. So let's review all the configurations and then create your virtual machine. So here you can see that our virtual machine has been created, validation has been passed, and it takes a couple of minutes to get that updated. So let's wait for a few more minutes so that our virtual machine is ready. And primarily what we want to look into is that our virtual machine is created in a correct VNet, and it gets the private IP address from the subnet that has been part of the VNet which has been defined in the creation of a virtual machine. So let's wait for a couple of more minutes and we'll look into the status of the VNet. Now you can see here our test virtual machine has been created. Now what we wanted to look into is that our virtual machine is created in a correct subnet or not, and that is something which we can validate by checking the private IP address. So it got the private IP from the range of the IP address that we have specified in the subnet. Now in order to access this particular virtual machine, you have to use the public IP, since we have to access it from the internet. So from the private IP, this virtual machine will not be accessible. So that's the reason that when we created a virtual machine, we allocated the public IP address also for this instance. So that is with respect to the virtual network and the demonstration on it, and how we can create a VNet and the subcomponents of the VNet, how they are associated or interlinked with each other, and that actually creates a kind of an isolated environment on the public cloud, which gives you the understanding that you can work into just like an on-prem environment.
So what is Azure DevOps? Azure DevOps enables teams to organize work, collaborate on code development, and build and deploy applications using developer services. Azure DevOps is a culture and set of protocols that brings together developers, project managers, and contributors to collaborate on software development. It enables businesses to create and enhance products more quickly than they could with traditional software development methods. You can use Azure DevOps services in the cloud or Azure DevOps server on premises. Azure DevOps has built-in functionality that you may access via a web browser or an IDE client. Depending on your business needs, you can use one or more of the following standalone services. Azure Repos. Azure DevOps are built-in functionality. So for source management of your code, Azure Repos offer Git repositories or Team Foundation version control. Azure Pipelines. Build and release services provided by Azure Pipelines to assess continuous integration and delivery of your applications. Azure Boards. Using Kanban and Scrum methodologies, Azure Boards provides a set of agile tools for planning and tracking work, code bugs, and issues. Azure Test Plans. Manual and exploratory testing and continuous testing are among the options available in Azure Test Plans for testing your applications. And at last, Azure Artifacts. This allows teams to share packages from public and private sources, including Maven, NPM, NuGet, and more, and incorporate package sharing into their pipelines. So this brings us to the features of DevOps. First we have is dashboard control. You can rapidly navigate to different regions of the project, build and manage dashboards, and set dashboard widgets using the DevOps dashboard functionality. Then we have improved source control. Git and Team Foundation version control, a centralized client-server system, which are two prominent methods of source control supported by Azure DevOps solution. To observe change history, you can add and manage Azure Git tags, reviews, downloads, and modify files. Following that, we have plan and track your work. You can utilize Azure DevOps systems to track features, requirements, user stories, tasks, issues, and more using a variety of work items. Then we have integrated collaboration servers, a tool that allows teams to collaborate throughout the whole Azure DevOps feature set, including team dashboards, project wiki, discussion within work item forms, and many others. Then we have support for exploratory testing. Manual exploratory and continuous testing are made easier with Azure DevOps, which include workflow customization, end-to-end traceability, criteria-based selection, and real-time visualization that show the test activities. And at last comes continuous integration and deployment. Many developers use CI/CD, and Azure DevOps makes it so easy to do so. Developers may automate various design activities with Azure pipelines, including defining and building association steps, writing test instructions, and managing simultaneous releases. Well, this brings us to Azure DevOps services. You get an integrated set of services and tools with Azure DevOps to manage your software project, from planning to development to testing and deployment. A client or server model is used to deliver these services. Many of them are offered via a user-friendly web interface that works with all major browsers. So source control, build pipelines, and work tracking are just a few of the services that may be managed through a client. You can see the left pane is where you access Azure DevOps services as demonstrated in the figure below. So now that we have covered Azure DevOps services, let's move on to Azure DevOps Server. Version control, reporting, requirements, management, project management, automated builds, testing, and release management are all capabilities of Azure DevOps Server, a Microsoft product. It provides DevOps features and spans the complete application cycle. So now that we know what Azure DevOps Services and Azure DevOps Server are, so let's have a crisp comparison between them to know how exactly they differ from each other. Despite the fact that Azure DevOps Service is a hosted version of Azure DevOps Server, there are several features that differ. Some functions of Azure DevOps Server aren't available in Azure DevOps Services. So when deciding which platform to use or considering a transition from on-premises to the cloud, keep the following points in mind: scope and scale data, authentication, users and groups, and manage user access. So first is scope and scale data. Azure DevOps Services and Azure DevOps Server are slightly different. Organizations and projects are currently the only alternatives for scoping and scaling data. Azure DevOps Services organization get their own URLs and always have exactly one project collection, whereas deployment, project collection, and projects are the three methods for scoping and scaling data in Azure DevOps Server. Then we have authentication. To connect to Azure DevOps Services using the public internet, depending on your organization's arrangement, you can use Microsoft account credentials or Azure AD credentials to log in. You can also configure Azure AD to require multi-factor authentication, IP address restrictions, and other security features. But you connect to an intranet serving using Azure DevOps Server. Windows authentication and your Active Directory domain credentials are used to log in. So this method is completely open and you will never be asked to sign in. Next we have users and groups. You may use a similar technique to grant access to groups of users in Azure DevOps Services. Azure AD groups can be added to Azure DevOps Services group. So you must add users one at a time if you utilize Microsoft account instead of Azure AD. On the other hand, by adding Active Directory groups to multiple Azure DevOps groups, you may grant user access to deployments in Azure DevOps Server. The membership of AD groups are kept in sync, so users gain and lose access to Azure DevOps Server as they're added and withdrawn in AD. And at last, there is Manage User Access. You manage access to features in Azure DevOps and Azure DevOps Server by assigning users to an access level. Each user in your Azure DevOps Services organization must be assigned an access level. As usual, as Visual Studio subscriber sign in, Azure DevOps Services verifies them. So without a Visual Studio subscription, you can give basic access to 5 users for free. Whereas all use of Azure DevOps Server is on the honor system. Specify the access levels on the administration page to set access levels for users based on their license and assign unlicensed user stakeholder access only. So now that we have covered all the important features and concepts of Azure DevOps, now let's move on to the next very important aspect of Azure DevOps, which is Azure DevOps Lab. The Azure DevOps Lab is a place where you can learn about software development and operations with Azure DevOps services. You can simplify and speed up the DevOps process. It explains how to use Azure DevOps services to automate software delivery and satisfy business requirements. So to understand it in a better way, let's have a demo of Azure DevOps Lab. So let's start with our Azure DevOps demo. So first, what we need to do is navigate to this website, azure.microsoft.in, or we can directly log in through dev.azure.com also. So first, what we need to do is sign into a Microsoft Azure account. So after signing in, you'll be led to this page that you just need to click on continue. And here what you need to do is create an organization under which you're gonna create your projects, multiple projects, and you're gonna attach your team members to it or group members to it whom you want to give the access to your projects. So what is the difference between organization and project is, if you have given anybody access to your organization or somebody is a part of your organization, then that particular individual will have access to all of your projects. But if you have given somebody only access to your project, then he'll be only restricted to that particular project. He won't be able to access any other project that is present under that particular organization that you both are part of. So basically, organization is something that is used to connect to groups of a related project or somebody who is already a part of a particular organization. So here we will give it a name. So I am giving simply demo as the organization name. And here you can see that the projects under this organization will be hosted under the South India region. And we need to enter the captcha. And click on continue. Just a second. So now you can see it is saying that it is taking you to an organization. Okay, so we already have an organization of the same name. So let's just change it to something else. Let's give it simply demo org. So here you can see this saying that it's taking to your Azure DevOps organization where you'll be creating your projects. So now you can see your organization name here, and here you just need to create a project name. So I'm giving it simply demo project. Now below you can see visibility. We can opt either public or private. So what is public or private? So basically, if you keep it keep the visibility of the project public, then once you copy this URL, so as I was saying, once you copy this URL into some other browser or incognito mode, you will be able to have the access to the project. But if you keep its visibility private, then only the people who have real access to your organization or to your project will be able to access that project or will be able to see that project or work on it. As you can see, public projects are disabled for our organization, so we can't select public, so we'll go for private and click on create project. Now here you can see the home page of your organization where you have this project, and here you can access the statistics of project, how it is performing, how much time you have contributed to it, or what all services you have added to your project. And down below you will be able to see that there is just one member, which is the root user of this project, and once you start adding more members to your project, it will their details will be added to this particular block. So now here you can see these are the services, boards, repos, pipelines, test plans, and artifacts services that is provided to you to add to your project. So now let's have a look at them one by one. So first one is boards. As we click on boards, you can see multiple options, your work items, boards, backlogs, sprints, queries, delivery plans. Here you can see it is all empty as we haven't added any service or we haven't worked on a project yet. So let's just click on new work item. So here you can see one is epic, issue, and task. So epic is an option that is, you can see a pro option for work items. So basically epic represents business initiative to be accomplished, and it is basically available for basic, agile, scrum, and CMMI process templates. So what it exactly does is increases customer engagement, that whatever your project is, if it's the engagement of your project, that how it's performing and how it is performing towards the people whom you have given access to the project. Also helps to create new architecture to improve the performance of your project, and it also supports mobile applications. So basically when you're deploying any mobile application in your project or creating a mobile application as a project, so it will be able to support that as well. Let's click on Epic. So here you can see you need to enter a title for your Epic option. So here you need to add the title of your Epic, like for say we are creating a healthcare or an e-commerce application. So obviously it will be segmented into different parts, like you'll be having search options or support options or home page. So we just need to give it a name, and here you can see its state is to do. For now we just have to do, because we haven't actually created anything in our project and we haven't given any input. So it's in to-do list, and once we start working on it, we can change the state. It can be in progress or completing. So there are multiple states for your Epic. And here you can see the area is simply demo project. That means that we want to assign this search new Epic into this project. And we can also click description over here, that what exactly our new Epic is about. Like for search options, we need to specify or give a description that This is for searching options related to our application. Like for healthcare, one can type medicines or doctors or slots. So that is thing that we can add in our description, that it will help the user to understand what this feature is about. So this was epic, and once done we can click on save. So here you can see other stuffs also, like priority. So we can select priority according to our will. So here by default it is priority 2. So priority basically is which function will come first. And here you can mention start date, target date. So once it's done, you can click on save. Now let's move to the next one. Second, what we have is issue. So basically issues are for you to track your work, and epics are used to track the group work and the large scenarios. But this is track like we saw the project statistics, so it will help you to understand the individual progress. So basically issues are raised when you find any obstacle in your progress or in your work. So it can be compared to impediments also. So when you're working with Agile, you need to deal with issues. So by default we have Agile to our project assigned. So like for example, we can see that we have a meeting. So during the meeting, members report if they have encountered any bug or any impediments. So what next we have to do is we have to track them and resolve it. So these are the issues that can one can find, like possibilities. So you can assign here and give it a description again and just save it. So once a user faces these issues, we can keep a track of it, and once it is raised, we can resolve it. Coming to the next one. Next we have is task. So by the name only we can well understand what task is. So a task is a smaller item or smaller segment to track activity that contains all the information needed to accomplish a part of an issue, or you can say user story requirements. So this option is available for basic, agile, scrum and CMMI process templates. So again we can give it a name, what task we want to assign, and give it a description, and according to that we can select the priority and save it. So the task will be added to your project. We are not assigning any task right now because, as I said, we haven't added any particular project or particular details or application, or we haven't deployed any application yet in our project. So that is why we are not adding anything over here again, because first we need to understand what these services are and what these services are used for. Next we have backlogs. So backlogs helps you to understand the flow of your project. Like today you have contributed 10% of your time, and you have completed the 10% of the work, or you have worked on certain segments of the project, like for say you have worked on the support area. So it helps you to understand and keep a track of the flow of your project, how it is performing and how it is developing and how it is built every day. Next we have is sprints. So sprints are basically a time-boxed intervals that supports your team's ability to work using the agile processes and tools. So what you can do is, whether you're having, let's say you're having a healthcare application, so you just need to have a segment of it and drop it over here. So what it will do is it will get the attention of all the team members. So basically what it does, it makes your project more manageable. It increases the quality of your project and also makes it work even more faster and more frequently once you add the segment to the sprint. So you can say it in one way, it gets the priority and people need to work on it, and it gives your project more flexibility to adapt to change. Now sometimes what happens is many associates scrum sprints with agile software development. So sometimes agile are often thought to be the same thing. Coming to the next one, we have queries. So the query page basically remembers the view you have last navigated, and when you log in again or when you come back again to the same portal, it returns you to that very particular view only. So you can say that it runs with Azure DevOps command line interface, and all the open all the pages like you have gone through, you can keep a track of it over here. You just need to click over here all, and you can just see all the queries you have defined in all this while, and also you can share the queries with the team members, so they can also know that where you have been working lately, or which segment you have been working on, or what was the last navigation which you have been going through in this whole project. So it can help you manage your project in a more efficient way and keep a track of how and what all segments you have been working on and what all segments you need to work on in your project. Coming to the next one, we have delivery plans. So here you can see we haven't created any plan yet. So basically delivery plans are a calendar view of multiple teams or team backlogs or individual backlogs from different projects. So basically it replaces the delivery plans marketplace extension, and it is only available for Azure DevOps services. So here you can say it's a summary or time summary of all the projects you have been working on in a particular organization. So now that we have covered both, let's move to the next one, which is repos. So with the name itself, we can well understand that repo stands for repositories. So basically it is a set of repositories that allows you to control and manage your project code. Like for say you're deploying a healthcare application, so these repos options help you create repositories and manage your code of that particular application in a more efficient way. So what you can do is you can connect project solutions by using the repos link. As you can see here, it is shown. So let's look into its option one by one. First we have files. So in files, your project solution will be available in this section. So repositories can create, manage and import those solutions. Okay, so you just need to upload your solutions of your code or your project here, and it will just create repositories for it, and it will help you manage those solutions in a better way. And you can see these clone to your computer, push an existing repository from command line, and import a repositories if you want to import any solution. Like here you can just click on import and add the solution to a repository. So this is what files do. Basically you can see it's like a physical folder itself where you have all your mini files or repositories or solutions, you can say, of data. So basically it functions like a physical folder itself. So it helps you keep a track of your codes and everything. Next comes is commits. So in commit section, we can manage commit history for your repositories that you have created in files. So it just commits those repositories with author details from branches. Like for say we have a team, one from support branch and one from management branch. So whoever creates that repositories and adds the solution, it commits that repositories under that particular member of the team with the branch name. Then comes pushes. So push histories are available in this section from each pull request done by the developers. Developers, for say, the team members who have been working on this particular project and creating repositories and solutions. So what is pull request? So pull request or PRs are a way to change or review or merge code in our repositories. So basically team uses these PRs to review code and give feedbacks or changes, whether like for say you are deploying a code or a solution. So one can review them, what all changes needs to be made or what all upgradation needs to be made, or whether the code is already fine or not. So basically teams use these PRs to review the solutions and codes stored in these repositories, or you can merge multiple solutions or multiple codes into the main branch. So basically reviewers can step through the proposed changes and leave those comments and vote to approve or reject that particular code, or you can say to upgrade or what all changes we want to make it. They vote for it, that whether that needs to be made to that particular solution or not. So these are the PRs. Next, we have branches. So we can manage multiple branching information in this particular section. You can create or release branches from master to dev. Okay, so all users can actually create or release branches from branching information available in this particular section. Next come tags. So tags are used to point out specific commits, like giving message tags and data information to branches. You can create your naming conventions to branches by using commit tags. And the next one is pull request, which we have already discussed, the PRs that are basically used in pushes. So now we have completed repos also. So let's move on to the next one, which is pipelines. So here you can see that we don't have any pipeline created for us yet. So let's have a look at its provided options one by one. So the first one is environments. So basically it is a collection of resources where you actually deploy your application that you're working on. So you can say it contains one or more virtual machines, containers, web apps, etc. Whatever resources you have actually used for deploying your application, or what all services you have used for creating the environment for the deployment of your application. For say we need to deploy our application and it needs an Windows Java environment. So whatever resources you need to create that environment, that will be added to this environment list. It will be listed over this section. Next we have releases option. So basically this pipeline stores the data of your pipelines or stages or tasks and deployments in Azure pipelines, that deployments you have done so far in your applications, for your applications actually. So you can say that it helps your team continuously deliver software to your customers at a faster pace with a very minimum, you can say lower risk. So you can fully automate the testing and the delivery of your software or applications on multiple stages. Or you can also set up an automated process with approvals and on-demand deployments. Then comes library. So again you can see the page is blank. From the name itself you can scrutinize that it will be a collection of assets from Azure DevOps projects. So basically it is a collection of build and release assets of a particular project. So assets defined in a library can be used in multiple builds and multiple releases pipelines of the project. Okay, so all assets that are defined in a library share a common security model. So you can control who can define new items in a library and who can use an existing item that you have already added in this library. So roles are defined for library items. For say you have added a particular asset or particular item to this library segment, and you can assign a particular member who will be working on this item. Okay, so roles are defined here for these, and these governs the operation you can perform on those items. That person will be keeping track of whatever changes have been made or whatever upgradation has been made to the particular item that has been added to this segment, library segment. So then comes task groups. So task groups are a way to standardize and centrally manage deployment steps for all applications in your projects. So when you include a task group in your definition and then make a change centrally to the task group, the change is automatically reflected in all the definitions. So we can conclude with this that a task group allows you to encapsulate a sequence of tasks already defined in, you can say, build or a release pipelines or into a single task group. So it just encapsulates all those sequence of tasks. So you can choose to extract the parameters from those encapsulated tasks as configured variables and abstract the rest of the task information. So what happens is the new task group is automatically added to the task catalog, and it is ready to be added to other release and build pipelines. So task groups are stored at the project level and are not accessible outside the project group. So the task groups will be only limited to the members who you have assigned in this project, and it won't be accessible to the other people or other team members from different projects, even though they are the member of the same organization. So you can say it's more of a private segment. Now that we have covered task groups, next we have deployment groups. So, deployment groups are only available with classic release pipelines, and it is totally different from the deployment jobs. It is basically a collection of deployment related steps defined in a YAML file to accomplish a specific task. So, in nutshell, it is a logical set of deployment target machines that have agents installed on each one. The deployment groups represent the physical environment, for example, testing or development or production environment. So a development group is just another grouping of agents, much like an agent pool, you can say. So what you can do with this is you can specify the security context and runtime targets for the agents, or you can let yourself view live logs for each server as a deployment take place. Or you can also enable you to use machine tags to limit deployment to a specific set of servers. So this was about deployment groups. Now that we have covered one more service, let's move on to the next one, that is test plans. So test plans, the first one we have is progress report. So you can analyze with this only. The progress report will be the progress of the project you have been working on, or the deployments you have been doing, or the tasks you have been performing. So basically it lets you analyze and view data for more than one or an individual test plans in a particular project. So data for test plans can be migrated from an on-premises Azure DevOps server that won't show up in this report. Okay. So basically this section lets you drill down by each test plans and give you summary of each test plan in it. So this section also lets you to navigate to a test plan or suite of choice by double clicking on it. Okay. So this was the progress report. Next we have runs. So basically it represents the execution of pipelines. So during a run, the pipeline is processed and agents process one or more jobs. So when you run a pipeline, many things happen under the cover. While you often won't need to know about them, occasionally it's useful to have the bigger picture, right? So Azure pipelines will get processed under this test runs segment. So you'll be able to see what all performance is happening over here. Like while you're running a pipeline, you can see the running state, the date you have started that, or what all that running pipeline includes, like jobs, steps, and tasks. So runs power both continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines. Next we have load test. So basically Azure load testing is a fully managed Azure service that enables developers and testers to generate high scale load with custom Apache JMeter scripts and gain actionable insights to catch and fix performance bottlenecks at scale. So basically, application performance and resiliency are more important than ever before. So how you can run an Azure DevOps test? So first you need to click on it and select a test suite that contains all the automated tests, and you can just choose the run test option. And it will start processing it. So this service basically simulates traffic for your application, you can say, regardless of on which platform or where it is actually hosted. So now that we have covered test plans as well, let's move on to the next one, that is artifacts. So this is the last service that is provided to your project by Azure DevOps. So artifacts is a byproduct produced during the software development process. So it mainly consists of the project source code, dependency, or binaries or resources that could be represented in different layout depending on the particular technology. So it's like an extension that makes it easier to discover, install, or publish, and Maven packages in Azure DevOps. It's basically deeply integrated with other hubs like Build, so that package management can become a seamless part for your existing workflows. So what is exactly it is used for? So it can be used for both public and private organization with teams of any size. It basically manages your NPM or NuGet packages via feeds, and it allows you to create and share your Maven. So it's a package management solution integrated with your Azure DevOps. So this was all about the services that is provided to your projects. So now that you know what all services do for your project and what are their benefits and how they function, now you can actually plan your project and start creating and working on it and start deploying with the users and what all services you want for your particular project. So what you can do is click here on project setting. Just a second. Yeah, you can just click on project setting. So now what you can do is you can add in description that what your actual project is about. So for say, like I said, if you're creating in a healthcare application, so you can just give it a description that it is for healthcare related issues, queries, and helps needed, and like you're tying that particular application with different hospitals or healthcare organizations. So you can actually add those information in this description. And the process, which basically it is basic or private one, but you do get a range of process for your project when it depending on the visibility of it, like for Agile or Scrum, you can say. So now here you can see that only my ID is attached to it, as I'm the only member here and I'm the administrator. So you can add members here, and scrolling down, you can, now that you know what all services provide you or what they provide to your project, so depending on the need of your project, you can just select the services you want to assign to your particular project. Like, per se, if I don't want boards assigned to it, or you can say if I don't want the services provided by the board, you can just click on it and select remove boards, and I just need to refresh it. So yeah, here you can see I have overview, repos, pipelines, artifacts, but I don't have test plans and boards. As you can see, test plan is basically all the collection of whatever you're managing, which is indirectly assigned to boards. So as you remove the boards, the test plans also get removed. Okay, and once like this, you can just select what all services you want specifically, and if you want to delete your project, you can just go ahead and delete it. So this was all about the Azure DevOps services and Azure DevOps Virtual Studio, we can say, and how the demonstration of how a project actually functions in this Virtual Studio.
If you're craving a more hands-on and detailed approach to Azure, Simplilearn's Caltech postgraduate program in cloud computing is the perfect fit for you. Click the link in the description to explore more about this course.
Azure certification path. We'll go over the Microsoft Azure certification test in this video and present useful information to assist you to decide on a career path. Microsoft offers 3 certification paths for a variety of technical jobs. To gain certification, you must complete a series of exams. And the first one is Fundamentals Certification. These certifications are suitable for those who are just getting started in technology or considering a career shift. Second is Role-Based Certification. To begin acquiring valuable job role abilities, choose a role-based certification. Third is Additional Certification. Examining Microsoft Office technical qualifications as well as Specialist and Microsoft Certified Educator certifications. Now in each category, we have sorted the certifications for your better understanding. In the first category, Fundamental Certification, are Microsoft Certified Azure Fundamentals, Microsoft 365 Certified Fundamentals, and Microsoft Certified Power Platform Fundamentals. In the second category, role-based certifications are Microsoft 365 Certified Security Administrator Associate, Microsoft Certified Azure Developer Associate, and Microsoft Certified Dynamics 365 Sales Functional Consultant Associate. And in the third category, additional certifications are Microsoft Certified Azure for SAP Workload Specialty, Microsoft Certified Educator, and Microsoft Office Specialist, Microsoft Word Expert. So let's start with the first one, Microsoft Certified Azure Fundamentals. The Azure Fundamentals certification allows you to demonstrate that you understand cloud concepts, Azure services, Azure workloads, Azure security and privacy, and Azure pricing and support. Candidates should have basic understanding of technical fundamentals such as networking, storage, computation, application support, and application development. Candidates for the Azure Fundamentals certification should have a solid understanding of cloud services and how Microsoft Azure deliver them. This certification is for applicants who are new to Azure or who are just starting to work with cloud-based solutions and services. Moving ahead, let's look into its skills requirement. Describe cloud concepts, describe core Azure services, describe core solutions and management tools on Azure, describe general security and network security features, describe identity governance, privacy, and compliance features, and describe Azure cost management and service level agreements. This certification is suitable for job roles like administrator, business user, developer, student, technology manager, and its exam code is AZ900. Price of this examination is $99 USD and the renewal time is 2 years. Coming to the next one is the Microsoft 365 Certified Fundamentals Certification. It verifies that you are familiar with Microsoft 365 feature and benefits, as well as the advantages of using cloud services, the software as a service, cloud model, and the Microsoft 365 cloud service. These are the skills required to earn this certification. Describe cloud concepts, describe core Microsoft 365 services and concepts, explain security, compliance, privacy, and trust in Microsoft 365, and describe Microsoft 365 pricing and support. This certification is apt for job roles like business user and administrator, and the exam code for this examination is MS900. The examination fee is 99 USD and the renewal time is 2 years. Next is Microsoft Certified Power Platform Fundamentals. If you're a student, a business user, or a new technical professional, using your Microsoft Power Platform skills to better your team's efficiency, this certification can help you advance your career. To prepare for it, you only need a basic understanding of computer technology, data analytics, cloud computing, and the internet. Consider a fundamental certification the initial step towards expanding your skill set and moving on to more advanced certifications like Microsoft Power Platform Functional Consultant. And the skill set required for this certification are describe the business value of Power Platform, identify the core components of Power Platform, demonstrate the capabilities of Power Platform, describe the capabilities of Power Apps, demonstrate the capabilities of Power Automate, demonstrate the business value of Power Virtual Agents.
This certification is perfect for job roles like business user, functional consultant, student, and its exam code is PL900. The examination fee for this exam is 99 USD and its renewal time is 2 years. Now let's dive into the second category, which was role-based certification. The first certification exam in this category is Microsoft 365 Certified Security Administrator Associate. Microsoft 365 Security Administrators protect Microsoft 365 enterprise and hybrid environments by proactively securing them and implementing and managing security and compliance solutions, responding to threats, and enforcing data governance policy. This exam assesses your ability to use Microsoft 365 to implement and manage identity and access, threat protection, information security, and governance and compliance features. The skills required for this certification are implement and manage identity and access, implement and manage threat protection, implement and manage information protection, manage governance and compliance features in Microsoft 365. Now, this certification is perfect for the administrator role, and its exam code is MS500. Its examination fee is 165 USD and its renewal time is again 2 years. Then comes Microsoft Certified Azure Developer Associate. Candidates for the Azure Developer Associate certification should have experience designing, developing, testing, and supporting Microsoft Azure cloud applications and services, participating in all aspects of cloud development from requirements definition and design to development, deployment, and maintenance, as well as performance tuning and monitoring is part of its role responsibilities. Now, the skill set essential for this certification are develop Azure Compute Solutions, develop for Azure Storage, implement Azure Security, monitor, troubleshoot, and optimize Azure Solutions, connect to and consume Azure services and third-party services. Now, this certification is for a job role like developer, and its exam code is AZ204. Its examination fee is 165 USD with the renewal time of 2 years. Moving on, next is Microsoft Certified Dynamics 365 Sales Functional Consultant Associate. This certification could help you advance in your career if you're a functional consultant, a Microsoft Dynamics 365 sales professional, or a developer wishing to improve your consulting skills. It enables you to better pitch yourself for projects and demonstrates to your company how Dynamics 365 sales can be used to empower salespeople. You have expertise with Microsoft Power Platform and are familiar with Dynamics 365 model-driven apps and data modeling techniques as a candidate for this certification. For this certification, skills required are perform configuration, manage core sales tables, configure additional tools and services, configure Microsoft Dataverse, create apps by using Microsoft Power Apps, create and manage Microsoft Power Automate, implement Microsoft Power Virtual Agent chatbots, integrate Microsoft Power Apps with other apps and services, and manage solutions. Now, this certification is suitable for the functional consultant profile, and the exam code for this exam are PL200 and MB210. The examination fee for this exam is 165 USD and the renewal time is 2 years. Now comes the third category, additional certification. And the first certification exam in this category is Microsoft Certified Azure for SAP Workloads Specialty. Architects or engineers with substantial experience and knowledge of the SAP system landscape and industry standards that are particular to the initial migration or integration as well as the long-term operation of an SAP solution on Microsoft Azure should apply for this certification, making recommendations on services and modifying resources as needed for optimal resiliency, performance, scale, provision, size, and monitoring are among the responsibilities of an architect or engineer for Azure for SAP workloads. Skills required for this certification are migrate SAP workloads to Azure, design and implement an infrastructure to support SAP workloads, design and implement high availability and disaster recovery, maintain SAP workloads on Azure. Now, this certification is perfect for job roles like administrator, solution architect, and its exam code is AZ120. Its exam fee is 165 USD with a renewal time of 2 years. Then comes Microsoft Certified Educator. The Microsoft Certified Educator (MCE) credential verifies that teachers possesses the global educator technology literacy competencies required to provide students with a rich personalized learning experience. Educators in training, instructors at teachers education colleges and in-service educators all benefit from MCE certification. So these are the skills required: facilitate student collaboration, skilled communication, self-regulation, real-world problem-solving and innovation, facilitate student use of information and communication tools, and use ICT to be an effective educator. Now, this certification is suitable for developer and educator profiles, and its exam code is 62193. Its examination fee is 127 USD, and its renewal time is 2 years. Now comes the last but not the least one in this category, and it is Microsoft Office Specialist Microsoft Word Expert. Earn the Microsoft Office Specialist Word Expert certification to show that you have the skills needed to get the most out of Word. This credential demonstrates proficiency in the creation and management of professional papers for a variety of purposes and scenarios. The skills essential to gain this certification are manage document options and settings, use of advanced editing and formatting features, creating a custom document elements, and use advanced Word features. Now, this certification is suitable for job profiles like business users, and its exam code is MO101. The exam fee for this certification is 100 USD, and its renewal time is 2 years. So this was all about Azure certification part. Apart from this, not only will you need to learn how to design, manage, and protect Azure cloud systems in order to become certified and land a job, but you'll also need real hands-on experience.
I will take you through its various important factors that you need to know before proceeding with this certification. So without further ado, let's get started. But before moving any further, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and do hit the bell icon to never miss an update from Simplilearn. So let us first see what all topics that we are going to cover in this video. First, we will explore the basics and understand what Azure certifications are. Then we will explore what Azure Administrator Certificate is about. After which, we will look into who can take this certification. Then, we will see what all syllabus we need to cover on to appear for this examination. After that, we will explore how to apply for this certification. Later on, we will discuss some tips and tricks required for this examination preparation. And then we will look into some of the practice questions for your better understanding. And in the end, we will see what will companies hire Azure administrators. So let's first understand what Azure certification is. Aspirants who wants to manage, upgrade, and establish applications and networking routes over the global channel can get a specialization in cloud computing with the Microsoft Azure certification. Microsoft Azure is well known and respected around the world as the most trustworthy cloud provider. As a result, folks who have earned a Microsoft certification have a plethora of options to choose from. Now that we know what Azure certification is, let's move on to the explanation of what Azure Administrator Associate certification is about. Azure administrators are in charge of cloud storage, security, networking, and compute services. The Microsoft Azure Administrator Associate certification is a role-based certification that verifies a professional's competence to implement, manage, and maintain Microsoft Azure systems, including major compute services, storage, network, and security services. Now let's have a look at who all can apply for this examination. Candidate must have at least 6 months of hands-on experience administering Azure and a solid understanding of key Azure services in order to take this certification. Along with that, one should also have experience in PowerShell, Azure CLI, Azure Portal, and Azure Resource Management templates. Now let's dive deeper into this and explore what syllabus are required to appear for this examination. First is Manage Azure Identities and Governance. Now this topic covers 15 to 20% of the examination. Then comes Implement and Manage Storage. This topic also covers 15 to 20% of the examination. After that, we have Deploy and Manage Azure Company Resources. This covers 20 to 25% of the examination. Then we have Configure and Manage Virtual Networking. This covers 25 to 30% of the examination. And then we have Monitor and Backup Azure Resources, which covers 10 to 15% of the examination. Now, let's have a look at how to apply for this examination. Now, the details you need to focus on are the cost of the examination is 165 USD and its annual salary is $107,683. The duration of this examination is 120 minutes and the number of questions varies between 40 to 60. The types of question can be either multiple choice or multiple response. And the passing score to ace this examination is 70% with the renewal time of 2 years. Now that we have covered all the technical details needed to appear for this examination, let's have a look at some of the important tips for the preparation of this examination. First is, check Microsoft official AZ-104 exam page. You should review the official AZ-104 exam detail page on the Microsoft website before beginning your preparation. This is Microsoft's most reliable page for sharing the most up-to-date and accurate exam information. Second is, understand the exam topics. Each exam has its own set of modules and weights. As a result, it's critical to thoroughly comprehend the revised AZ-104 exam objectives. If you have a good understanding of each domain and module, you can prepare successfully for the exam. This act will assist you in maintaining a higher level of concentration on the modules that have a high weightage in the exam. Third is online training, resources, and reference books. Online training is one of the simple and convenient training techniques that can help you prepare for the exam. You will study the topics of the exam modules from industry experts through online training classes. You can also pay for customized instructor-led instruction from any other training provider to prepare for exam goals. But this can be costly. Also, you can seek help from books like Microsoft Azure Administrator Exam Reference AZ-103 book that is a part of exam reference series. Fourth, we have study groups and online discussion forums. Joining study groups and discussion forums for exam preparation should be the first step in your preparation. Joining study groups and discussion forums gives you the opportunity to network with other Azure administrators and exam candidates. On forums, you may get answers to your concerns and have your issues fixed. As a result, it's critical to participate in some Azure discussion groups. And at last, but not the least, the fifth one is practice with simulators and mock exams. You can improve your confidence and have everything set for your AZ-104 exam in this final phase when you feel you have covered all of your bases in terms of resources and preparation steps. You should focus on getting some good simulators. These AZ-104 test simulators are meant to simulate a real exam setting. You can use the simulator to identify your skills and weaknesses so that you can work on them. Now, let's have a look at some of the practice questions for your better understanding of this examination. So the first question is, you have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1 that contains an Azure Log Analytics workspace named Workspace 1. You need to view the error events from a table named Event. Which query should you run in the Workspace 1? And the options are Get Event where event type equal error. Option B, search in event error. Option C, select from event where event type equal error. And D, search in event where event type is equal error. And the correct answer is option B. Now moving on to the next question, you have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. Subscription 1 contains the resource groups in the following table. RG1 has a web app named Web App 1. Web App 1 is located in West Europe. You move Web App to RG2. What is the effect of the move? And the options are: the app service plan for Web App 1 remains in the West Europe. Policy 2 applies to Web App 1. Option B, the app service plan for Web App 1 moves to North Europe. Policy 2 applies to Web App 1. Option C, the app service plan for Web App 1 remains in the West Europe and Policy 1 applies to Web App 1. And option D, the web app service plan for Web App 1 moves to North Europe. Policy 1 applies to Web App 1. And the correct answer is option A. If the source and target plans are in the same resource group and geographical region, you can migrate an app to another app service plan. Now, the app service plan in which your app runs determines the region in which it runs. You cannot, however, change the location of an app service plan. So now coming on to the next question. You have an Azure subscription linked to an Azure Active Directory tenant. The tenant includes a user account named User1. You need to ensure that User1 can assign a policy to the tenant root management group. What should you do? And the options are: assign the owner role for the Azure subscription to User1 and then modify the default conditional access policies. Option B, assign the owner role for the Azure subscription to User1 and then instruct User1 to configure access management for Azure resources. Option C, assign the global administrator role to User1 and then instruct User1 to configure access management for Azure resources. And option D, create a new management group and delegate User1 as the owner of the new management. And the correct answer is B. Now let's move on to the next question. You need to ensure that an Azure Active Directory user named admin1 is assigned the required role to enable traffic analytics for an Azure subscription. Now the solution is you assign the owner role at the subscription level to admin1. Does this meet the goal? And the option is either yes or no. And the correct answer is yes. Your account must meet one of the following to enable traffic analytics. So your account must have any one of the following Azure roles at the subscription scope: owner, contributor, reader, or network contributor. Now the next question is, you have an Azure subscription. Users access the resources in the subscription from either home or from customer sites. From home, users must establish a point-to-site VPN to access the Azure resources. The users on the customer sites access the Azure resources by using site-to-site VPNs. So you have a line of business app named App1 that runs on several Azure virtual machines. The virtual machines run Windows Server 2016. So you need to ensure that the connections to App1 are spread across all the virtual machines. So what are the two possible Azure services that you can use? And the options are A, an internal load balancer; B, a public load balancer; C, an Azure Content Delivery Network or CDN; option D, Traffic Manager; and option E, an Azure Application Gateway. And the correct answer is A and E. Network traffic from the VPN gateway is routed to the cloud application through an internal load balancer. The load balancer is located in the front-end subnet of the application. Now let's have a look at the companies that hire Azure Administrator Associate. Excellent, NCR Corporation, Cognizant, Bosch, Microsoft, and Yahoo are some of the great companies that hire Azure Administrator with great amount of packages and good amount of salary.
I would like to welcome you to this Azure interview preparation session. Knowing Azure is one thing, having worked on Azure is another thing, and being able to answer interview questions in Azure is a totally different thing. Although one helps the other, it's still different skills. And our aim through this video is to prepare you with common product and scenario based interview questions. So why wait? Let's get started. A common cloud interview question is, what's the difference between SaaS, PaaS and IaaS? We all know that software as a service is thin client model of software provisioning, where client in this case usually is simply a web browser providing the point of access to softwares running on the servers. Now SaaS is the most familiar form of cloud service for customers. SaaS moves the task of managing software and its deployment to third-party services, meaning the vendor actually gets to manage all that. So SaaS is software as a service involving applications being consumed and used by organizations. So it's generally using an application, and usually organizations pay for their use of this particular application. Now some examples of SaaS would include Office 365. Salesforce is another very good example of SaaS, and a lot of Google apps and storage solutions like Box and Dropbox are a very good example of software as a service. Talking about platform as a service or PaaS, it actually functions at the lower level than SaaS. Now, typically it provides a platform on which software can be developed and deployed. Now here we develop the software, we deploy the software. Now PaaS actually provides an abstract of much of the work dealing with servers and giving client an environment in which the operating system and the server software and the hardwares and the network are managed and taken care. In other words, with a platform as a service, all the things that I've mentioned, like the servers, the server software, the hardware, everything is managed by the provider, and we can focus on business side of the scalability, and we can focus on application development of our product or the service. So in short, platform as a service is a service that enables developers to build and work with applications without even having to worry about the infrastructure or management of the underlying hosting environments. And some examples of PaaS in Azure is SQL and Azure Storage. Talking about infrastructure as a service, IaaS, now this is moving down the stack even further. Now we get to the fundamental building block of the cloud service, which is infrastructure as a service, IaaS. Now IaaS is fully of highly automated scalable computer resources. IaaS is full of storage. IaaS is full of the network capability. That's what IaaS is. Now IaaS clients have direct access to the servers and storage, just as they would to do traditional servers. But in this case, it's going to be in the cloud. In this case, it's going to be more scalable. So IaaS is very similar to what you would do in your on-premises physical data center. But when we talk about IaaS, we get to do everything, but it's stored in the cloud. So if we need to build a definition around IaaS or infrastructure as a service provides users with components. It provides components. It does not give us a built environment. It simply provides a component such as operating system, networking capabilities, and a lot more. Now this is a paid for based on the usage and can be used to host applications. In other words, this is pay as you go type. The more you use, the more you pay. The less you use, the less you pay. And some of the examples of IaaS in Azure is virtual machine. That's a great example for IaaS, and VNets for networking. That's another good example for IaaS in Azure. Another common question in Azure Interview is, what are the instance types offered by Azure? The main intention of this question is, how well have you understood the different offerings in Azure, and how well are you trained to pick the right offering for the right service? Now, one size does not fit all, and there are a lot of services in Azure that under the carpet it does the same thing, but depending on how different your requirement is, we'll have to pick the appropriate service. So this question, what are the different instance types offered by Azure, it's to test how well have you used the product and services available in Azure and how well have you applied them for the given requirement. You shouldn't be provisioning more, you shouldn't be provisioning less at the same time. So it's kind of matching the right service to the right requirement. So what are the instance types offered by Azure? As you see in the list, we have general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, storage optimized, GPU virtual machines, and high performance compute virtual machines. Now, answering just the names won't be enough in an interview. You'll have to go further and explain why and in what scenario you would use general purpose and what are the use cases, what type of servers is a good fit for a general purpose and what type is a good fit for compute optimized, so on and so forth. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. So the general purpose VMs, they provide a balanced CPU to memory ratio, and it's very good for testing, very good for a development environment, very good for small and medium databases, and also for low to medium traffic web servers. And some of the use cases are, like we said, test servers, low traffic web servers, small to medium databases, some enterprise grade applications. It's also good for relational database. It's also good for servers used for in-memory caching. It's also good for some small analytic database, very good for microservices. And if you're trying to build a proof of concept for an idea that you just have or just parked, this is another good server for doing proof of concepts, because you're not going to send actual traffic to it. I just want to show that your idea works. So general purpose server is a very good use case for those scenarios. And the largest instance size we can get in general purpose is standard D64 V3. Which comes with 256 gigabit of memory and 1600 gigabit of SSD temporary storage. On the other hand, compute optimized VMs have a high CPU to memory ratio and are very good for medium traffic web servers, very good for batch processing servers, very good for application servers. Now, because it's compute optimized and compute means a CPU, it's an excellent choice for workloads that demand faster CPU but does not need as much memory or temporary storage virtual CPU. Some of the workloads that run very well on compute optimized are analytic workloads, gaming servers require more CPU, they run really well. Batch processing are some of the applications that can be placed in compute optimized, and by doing that we get the actual benefit of the compute optimized instance. And the largest instance size or the largest instance size type is standard F72's V2, and here we get 144 gigabit of memory and 576 gigabit of SSD temporary storage in compute optimized VMs. In the same lines, memory optimized to VM, they offer high memory to CPU ratio, and that are great for databases. Databases require more memory, so it's a great fit for a database, and it's a great fit for medium to large scale caches, applications that require in-memory analytics. So this memory optimized, memory is more, so it's very good for in-memory analytics applications. And the largest instance size we get here is standard M128M, and look at the gigabit of memory. It's 3892 gigabit of memory, and look at the temporary storage. It's 1436 gigabit of temporary storage. On the same lines, storage optimized. Now I guess I don't have to explain to you what storage optimized is used for. You might have easily guessed looking at the flow. Yes, storage optimized VM offer high disk throughput and IO and are very ideal for big data, SQL, NoSQL databases, data warehousing servers, large transactional databases, and a lot more. And some of the examples of the applications that can be launched on storage optimized are Cassandra, MongoDB, Cloudera, Redis. These are some familiar applications that can get benefited when we run them on storage optimized. And one difference between storage optimized and the other servers are they are generally optimized to use the local disk on the node attached directly to the VM rather than using an durable disk, which is actually a remote disk space. Now, what does this allow? This allows for greater input outputs per second or throughput for the workload. So that's what we get. A greater throughput, a greater input outputs per second is what we get when we use storage optimized. And the largest instance size available in storage optimized is standard L32S, and the memory is 256 gigabit. And look at the temporary storage, it's 5630 gigabit of temporary storage. GPU type VMs, easy to guess. GPU optimized VMs are specialized virtual machines available with multiple GPUs attached to them. Now, these sizes are designed for, or these VMs are designed for compute intensive, graphic intensive visualization workloads that require a lot of graphical processing unit attached to it. So in short, these are virtual machines that specialize in heavy graphic rendering and video editing. It also helps with model training and interferencing with the standard ND24RS, which has 448 gigabit of memory and 2948 gigabit of temporary storage. And the last but not the least, but the best, is high performance compute or Azure H series virtual machines. Now, they are the latest in high performance computing VMs and are aimed to handle workloads like batch processing, analytic, molecular modeling, and fluid dynamics. A lot of complicated applications in this VM. And this is the fastest and powerful CPU virtual machine with optional high throughput interfaces. And the largest instance size that's available is standard L32S, which comes with 224 gigabit of memory and 2000 gigabit of SSD temporary storage. And a third common question is, what are the deployment environments offered by Azure? There are two main deployment environments. One is the staging environment and the other one is the production environment. Now, in staging environment, let's talk about staging first. So when you're deploying your web app or web app on Linux, you can deploy them to a separate slot instead of the default production slot when running them in standard premium or isolated app service plan tiers. Now, the deployment slots are actually live app with their own host name. And at a later point, the staging environment can be swapped with the production environment. So why do we need a staging environment? What are the benefits of it? So the benefit of deploying our application to a non-production or staging environment, it provides a platform to validate changes to our application before it can be made live in the production environment. And in the staging environment, the app can be identified using the Azure's global unique identifier, also called as the GUID URL. And it's very similar to the production URL, except that it has a custom name in front of it that identifies it as the staging environment. And for production environment, this is the live production environment that's serving customers' requests, that's serving the customer content. Now, it can be slightly different from the staging environment in a way that the URL that's used to identify the production environment, that's more often DNS friendly name, like the name of the actual service.cloudapp.net. That way it differs. In case of staging environment, you have a custom name right before it, so the custom name and then the cloudapp.net, but in this case you get the direct service name as the name of the URL. So this is live production environment which receives and handles and serves customer traffic. Another commonly asked question in Azure is what are the advantages of scaling in Azure? The actual thought behind the question is to see how much have you understood scaling, how much have you seen and how much have you applied the scaling effect in the production environment and have received benefits in return. So let's talk about it. Advantages of scaling in Azure. Some of the advantages are we get the maximum application performance. Now, auto scaling is a built-in feature for the cloud services, be it AWS, Azure, Google, and a couple of other cloud service providers. It's a built-in feature for a cloud service. A cloud service should be auto-scalable. And that includes mobile services, virtual machines, and when we run our applications on mobile services or virtual machines, the website actually gets the best performance during the change in the demand. Again, different applications might require different performance needs. For example, for some apps, the performance is measured based on memory. And another good example is the fluctuating demand. For example, you could have a web app that handles millions of requests during the day and literally nothing at the night. And auto-scaling this environment, any of these environment will automatically scale or fatten your environment so to receive all the incoming traffic, and during lean period it actually gets slimmer and slimmer so to help you with the cost. So it actually maximizes the performance. That's what auto-scaling does. And like we said, auto-scaling scales up and scales down based on demand. It not only scales up but also scales down so to help you with the cost. And if you know the particular pattern in which the application is going to receive traffic, then we can very well go ahead and schedule scaling to our application or schedule scaling that infrastructure based on time. If we already know that Monday to Friday, that's the traffic that I would get, and it's a constant one. It's not a public facing, but it's an internal application. So I know all the 500 users or the 1,000 or the 5,000 users who will be using it. So at any given point, it's just 5,000 users. It's not going to go beyond that. And during Saturday and Sunday, literally nobody's going to be in office. So no load at all. So in that case, I pretty much know how the pattern is going to be. I can go for scheduled scaling if I know the pattern. And auto scaling, like I said, not only helps with keeping the application highly available, it also helps with the cost effectiveness of our infrastructure. So anytime there's a VM or a group of VMs running on less CPU, auto scaling is going to actually get the environment slimmer and slimmer, so we're not unnecessarily running any resources and paying for it. If you're being interviewed for the infra side in Azure, this is another common question that gets asked. How are Windows Active Directory and Azure Active Directory different? Let's talk about the Windows Active Directory first. The non-cloud Windows Active Directory the service was released along with Windows 2000 Server Edition, and this Active Directory is essentially a database that helps organizations to organize the users, organize the computers, and a lot more. It provides authentication and authorization to the applications. Not only to the applications but also to file servers, to printers, and a lot of other on-premises resources. That's what the basic non-cloud Active Directory does. On the other hand, the Azure Active Directory is not designed to manage web-based services. The Azure Active Directory, on the other hand, was designed to support web-based services that use REST API interfaces for Office 365, Salesforce.com, etc. Unlike the plain Active Directory, this uses a completely different protocol. So protocol wise, it's different, and the services that it supports is quite different. Now besides that, it also has a couple of other differences as well, and let's look at them. So the actual Active Directory or the Windows Actual Directory is a directory service that facilitates working with interconnected, complex, and different network resources in a very unified manner. On the other hand, Azure Active Directory is Microsoft's multi-tenant, cloud-based directory and identity management service. And the Windows Active Directory has 5 layers to store data, to store user details, and to issue the management certifications. On the other hand, Azure Active Directory integrates or compresses the 5 layers into just 2 layers. Here, Windows Active Directory works with on-premises servers like applications, file servers, and printers, etc. On the other hand, Azure Active Directory, it works on web-based services that use RESTful interfaces. If you're being hired for the development environment or for the cloud DevOps support environment, or even for the production support environment, you might find yourself being asked this question: what are the types of queues offered by Azure? Now Azure supports 2 types of queue mechanisms, the storage queue and the service bus queue. Let's talk about storage queue first. Now the storage queue, which are part of Azure storage infrastructure, it provides a simple REST based interface, simple REST-based get, put, and peek interface. It provides reliable, persistent messaging within and between the services. It follows the pub-sub model or a pub-sub messaging infrastructure, and it's best suited for users that need to store more than 80 gigabyte of messages in the queue. It can provide logs for all the transactions executed against the user's queue. So that's what we get with storage queue. And on the other hand, service bus queue. The service bus queues are built on top of broader messaging infrastructure, and they are designed to integrate applications and applications component that can span multiple communication protocols. So that way it differs. So this is good for applications and components that may span multiple communication protocols and even totally different network environments. So in short, these service buses or the service bus queues in Azure are part of Azure's messaging infrastructure, and they integrate applications or application components that can actually span multiple different protocols and multiple different network environments. It also provides an first in first out style for delivery, and the user's queue size has to remain under 80 gigabit. Another familiar question is, what are the advantages of Azure Resource Manager? Now, the Resource Manager helps us to manage the usage of the application resources. This question is actually to test how well have you tested, how well have you used Resource Manager and have gotten the benefit of it. This question actually tests how easy it has become after the introduction of Resource Manager compared to when doing deployments or when provisioning resources without the Resource Manager. So let's get into the answers for the question. What are the advantages of Azure Resource Manager? In short, Resource Manager is called ARM. So the ARM helps deploy, manage, and monitor all the resources for an application, a solution, or a group. So all the interconnected application, all the interconnected services can be monitored as group using Resource Manager. And users can be granted to access to resources that they require within a Resource Manager. So in an account, I can have like 10 different resources created by a Resource Manager or a resource group created by Resource Managers, and I can deny connection to those services or only to those services based on whether the user should be accessing one and not accessing the other. So that way it becomes easy to give access to a group of application. It helps in getting billing details for the group of resources. Now, which group is using more, which group is using less, and which group has contributed more to this month's bill, stuff like that. So those details can be obtained using Azure Resource Manager. And provisioning resources is made much easier with the help of this Resource Manager. Another question is, how has integrating hybrid cloud been useful for Azure? Well, with the use of hybrid cloud, we get the best of both the worlds. So what's hybrid cloud? It's nothing but combining the public cloud and the private cloud and allowing data and applications to be shared between them. So whenever the compute or the processing demand fluctuates, hybrid cloud computing gives businesses the ability to seamlessly scale their on-premises infrastructure in the public cloud and handle any kind of overflow in the requirement or overflow in handling the application. So it really helps. It boosts the productivity of our on-premises application. So with the hybrid cloud, we get a greater efficiency with combination of Azure services, DevOps processes and tools for the application running in on-premises. And by having a hybrid cloud environment, users can take advantage of a constantly updated Azure service and other AWS marketplace applications for their on-premises environment. And the other benefit is with hybrid cloud environment, we can simply deploy applications regardless of its locations. In case of on-premises, we'll have to worry about the location, but when we expand our on-premises environment in the cloud, we can pick any of the locations and simply deploy it in them. And this enables the applications to be created at a greater speed. What's federating in Azure SQL? Now this question is very specific about SQL. How can we scale the SQL database? Now this is a very good question or a valid question or an important question in the interview, because many customers or companies have not been able to meet the user demand because they could not scale out the databases. The theory of scaling out or adding servers to accommodate the increased workloads and traffic is not hard to understand, but the implications can be very complicated. The implications can be very expensive. We're well aware of scaling the web service, that's very common, but how do we scale the database? So Microsoft provides the tools and technologies so we can scale out the database in the cloud, and that's what is called SQL or federation in Azure SQL. So the way we scale out the SQL database is by sharding the database. So sharding actually enables users to take advantages of the resources in the cloud. Not only that, it allows users to have their own database or a shared database amongst each other. Because we're creating a highly available database, because we're having shards in a database, it actually reduces the possibility of a single point of failure for our database. And more importantly, because we're sharding, because we're using federation in Azure SQL, it provides an cost-effective scaling of our databases by using cloud resources or by using billing only for the cloud resources that we have used. So no pre-provisioning, no over-provisioning. It provisions the right amount and we pay the right amount. Let's talk about this one. What are the different types of storage offered by Azure? Now, the different types of storage offered by Azure are, as you already know, and as you can see, they are Azure blob storages, table storages, file storage, and queue storage. So let's expand one after the other. Now, blob storage are nothing but a massive scalable object storage, and that's very good for storing text and binary data. And Azure blob storage is Microsoft's object storage solution for the cloud. Now, blob storage is optimized for storing massive amount of unstructured data that can be in form of text or in form of binary data. So in short, blob storage enables users to store unstructured data, and those data can be in the format of pictures, music, video files, and lot more. And it stores them along with their metadata. And another advantage or another feature benefit that we get from blob storage is when an object is changed, it is verified to ensure it is of the latest version, number one. And number two, it provides maximum flexibility to optimize the user's storage needs. And this unstructured data is available to customers through an URL or an REST-based object storage. So they are the benefits that come along with the blob storage. Table storage, on the other hand, is a NoSQL store for schema-less storage of secured data. Now, this Azure Table Storage is a service that stores structured NoSQL data in the cloud. And because this table is schema-less, it's very easy to save your data. It's very easy to adapt your data as the need for your application grows. And this table storage is very fast and cost-effective for many type of applications. So some of the type of data that we can store is table storage is good for flexible databases like user data for web applications, address book storage, device information storage, and if you want to store metadata, this is a very good use case to store them in Azure Table Storage. Azure Files is another storage. Here it's a managed file share for cloud or on-premises deployment. So file storage provides file sharing capabilities accessible by the server messaging block protocol, and this can be accessed from the cloud and this can be accessed from on-premises as well. Here in file storage, the data is protected by SMB 3.0 and HTTPS protocols. And the more important thing is Azure takes care of managing hardware and the operating system deployments for Azure file storage. So this additional file storage can be used when we want to burst the storage capacity in on-premises. So on-premises, the primary, and cloud is the secondary or the extended on-premises storage. So it actually improves the on-premises performance and capabilities for our on-premises data center. And then we have queues, Azure Queues. It's a messaging store for reliable messaging between the application components. We spoke a little about this in the previous question. So the Azure Queue Storage is a service for storing a large amount of messages that can be accessed from anywhere in the world via HTTP or HTTPS protocol. In here, a single message can be up to 64 kilobits in size, and in a queue we can have millions of messages, and the limit can actually go up if we have not reached the limit of the storage account. So it's millions and millions of requests that can be stored in the storage queue or the queue storage. So the queue storage, in short, provides message queuing for large workloads, and it enables users to build flexible applications and separate the functions one from another, so one failing doesn't affect the other application which is running healthy. And this queue storage, it ensures the application is scalable and less prone to individual component failures because they are decoupled, separate now. It also helps in monitoring the queue, which ensures the customer's demands are met. So queue is a great place to monitor, or a great component to monitor, so we understand how much peak have we reached for a particular application, service, or a container. What is text analysis API in Azure Machine Learning? Now, text analysis is actually an cloud-based analytics API, and it provides an advanced natural language processing over the raw text. And it has got 4 main functions, like the sentiment analysis and the key phrase analysis, language deduction, and a few other things. Now, what do you mean by sentiment analysis? Now, sentiment analysis is from the logs, from the comments, from the text comments that we receive, do an analysis and find out whether that's a positive or a negative statement. Now, if it is the API returns an sentiment score between 0 and 1, and 1 is positive and 0 is negative. And then in text analysis, we have a key phrase extraction, which is it will automatically extract the key phrase to quickly identify the main points in that key phrase. For example, if you're analyzing an text which says the food was delicious and there were wonderful stuff, then the API returns the main talking points of that phrase, like food is the main talking point, and wonderful stuffs, that was a main talking point. So that's another feature that this text analysis has. And then we have language deduction in text analysis, right? Irrespective of what you paste, it can try to gauge and try to align it to the 120 or up to 120 languages that it supports. So I can simply take text from the internet and I can paste it, and text analysis software is going to identify the language and then can run phrase and sentiment analysis on those texts. Right. So in short, text analysis is an API, a set of web services that can be used for text analysis. It can be used to analyze unstructured statement, sentiment analysis, key phrase extraction, and a lot more. And the results are generally between 0 and 1, and 1 being positive and 0 being the negative sentiment. There is no much training, or in other words, this is not as complicated as a couple of other text analysis softwares are available in the market. We can simply paste, we can simply upload the text, and we can call the service and it runs a sentiment analysis on it all by itself. Let's look at this question. What are the advantages of Azure Queue Storage? If you're going to work in a development environment, if you're going to work in an environment that embraces DevOps, this could be a question. What are the advantages of Azure Queue Storage? Now, Azure Queue Storage is built to flexibly operate the applications and separate the functions between the applications that run large workloads. So when we design applications for scale, these applications can be decoupled so that they can scale independently. A thing happening on an application is not dependent on another application, and anything happens to a section of the application will not affect the other application because they are now decoupled and connected through the queue storage. So the queue storage gives us asynchronous message queuing for communication between the applications, irrespective of whether they are running in the cloud or whether they are running in desktop or whether they are running on premises or on mobile devices. So in short, this queue storage enables message queuing for large workloads in a simple and cost-effective and a durable manner. Talking about the advantages is it provides rich client libraries for Java, Android, C++, PHP, Ruby, and a lot other services getting added during every new release from Azure. And the main advantage again is it enables users to build flexible apps and separate the functions for bigger or greater durability. Again, introduction of queues into our application, it ensures our users' applications are scalable and less prone to individual component failures, meaning one component failing is not going to take the whole application down. Right? If one component fails, it's just that component that fails. The rest are healthy and the rest are going to function. It also helps us to monitor the queues and ensure the servers aren't overwhelmed by sudden traffic bursts. So how much do I have in the queue kind of determines the traffic for my application. And if the queue is more, I can always go and auto scale my environment, and the queue is less, I can always go and shrink or make my environment thinner so it can save cost. And anytime there is more data in the queue, I can auto scale, monitor the metric and do auto scaling based on that metric. So the environment knows that there are more data coming in. I need to expand myself to handle that much amount of data. This is a very common question. What are the two kinds of Azure Web Service roles? Now, a service role is a set of managed and load balanced virtual machines that work to perform some task. And based on what it's going to run on top of it, is it going to run a web service or is it going to run a worker service, defines what kind of roles that gets attached or that goes on this virtual machines. So we have two types, web role and worker roles. The web role is a cloud service role that's configured to run web applications developed on programming languages, technologies. And majorly they support IIS, Internet Information Service, and they support ASP.NET, PHP, Windows Communication Foundation, and so on. So that's web roles. And these web roles, it automatically deploys and hosts application through the user's IIS, Internet Information Service. On the other hand, worker roles are roles that runs applications and service level tasks which generally do not require IIS. So IIS is actually the differentiating factor. So in worker roles, IIS is not installed by default. The worker roles are mainly used to perform supporting background process along with web roles and do tasks automatically compressing or uploading the images, running scripts, and or doing some changes in the database, getting new messages from the queue and processing, and a lot more. The work, the applications, or the work that does not require IIS. That's what this worker role does. Again, the main difference between the web role and the worker role is that the web role automatically deploys and hosts your application through IIS, whereas the worker role does not use IIS and runs our application as standalone. This is another classic question. What is Azure Service Fabric? So Azure Service Fabric is actually a distributed system platform that makes it easy to pack, deploy, and manage scalable and reliable microservices and containers. Now, Service Fabric also addresses some of the significant challenges in developing and managing cloud-native applications. And the problem that it addresses and fixes is, now developers and administrators can avoid complex infrastructure problems and focus on implementing mission-critical and demanding workloads that can be scaled and that can be managed through the console or from the single place. In short, Service Fabric provides a platform that makes the process of developing microservices and managing application lifecycle a lot easier. And the advantages of Service Fabric is that now we can produce application with faster time to market, because all the worry about the infrastructure is taken away from us. We don't have to design an infrastructure. All that we need to worry about is simply the application and the application lifecycle. Again, the advantage is it supports Windows, it supports Linux. Not only that, it supports servers on premises and in the cloud. With Service Fabric, we can scale up our environment to even 1,000 machines in just a single command. Or if there is an immediate need for 1,000 machines, I can immediately scale them up to 1,000 machines. That's possible with Service Fabric. Now let's look at this question. You can expect this question if the customer is running a hybrid environment, meaning having some of the applications in on-premises and running some of the applications from the cloud. And for some reason, when classifying the application that goes to the cloud and that stays on-premises, they have decided to keep the database in-house. So in that environment, a lot of customers do that. So in that environment, this is a classic and a scenario-based question. A client wants the front end of their application to be hosted on Azure in the cloud and wants the database to be hosted in on-premises for security reasons or to have full control on their databases. How do we go about suggesting a solution for this customer? The ideal solution in this scenario is to use the VNet-based point-to-site VPN solution. So all the front-end applications will be in the cloud and they'll be hosted in a VNet, and from the VNet they'll be connecting to the database through an point-to-site VPN. So the traffic and the writings and the reads are not coming through the internet, but through a point-to-site VPN link that's connecting the Azure VNet and the on-premises environment. And this model or this approach or this solution is best suited for scenarios where there are only a limited number of resources that needs to be connected between on-premises and the cloud. This is a very common question. What's Azure Traffic Manager? Of course, we no more running applications on a single server. We no more running applications on or from a single environment. Right? The same application is being run from multiple environments within Azure, and it can be running from Azure and on-premise as well. So multiple environments between Azure and on-premises. And a lot of customers have such environment. And if you're facing an interview with such customer, this could be an ideal question. What is Azure Traffic Manager? Now, the Azure Traffic Manager is a DNS-based traffic load balancer that actually enables us to distribute traffic between services across Azure global regions. And by doing this, it provides a good availability and a good responsiveness to the application. And this traffic manager, it uses DNS to direct client requests to the most appropriate service endpoint based on the traffic routing logic and the health of the endpoints that it maintains. So in short, this traffic manager is a load balancer that enables users to provide high availability and responsiveness by distributing traffic in an optimal manner across the Azure when we run the same application in different regions. So some of the advantages or some of the use cases of using Azure Traffic Manager is it provides multiple automatic failover options. It also helps with reduced downtime. It also helps with the distribution of user traffic across multiple locations. So one location is not overloaded. And then it helps with users knowing from where our customers are getting connected from. That's another big use case with Azure Traffic Manager. Let's look at this question. Right, this is an ideal question. Now there are a group of servers connected together within an virtual network, and now we need to move them or create a separation between them. How do you go about achieving it? So the question goes like this. You need to isolate network traffic among VMs in a subnet, which is part of a virtual network with little downtime and impact on the users. So that's the given scenario. And the best way we can do it is create a new virtual network and move all the VMs in that subnet to the new virtual network. Now, this feature is not possible with a lot of other cloud service providers like AWS and a lot of other providers. Now, in those environments, we might need to shut down, we might need to stop the VM, create a new VM based on the image, and it's an hefty process. But here in Azure, I can simply move the VMs from one subnet to another virtual network without needing for any additional security like the network security group. I can simply isolate them if I need to by creating a simple new virtual network and moving the servers to the new virtual network. Look at this one. This is another common question. With respect to Azure, what is public, private, and hybrid cloud? So this is really to test how well have you understood the different cloud offerings in the market, public, private, and hybrid, or at least the three basic offerings in the market, public, private, and hybrid cloud. Now, the public cloud is the most common way of deploying cloud computing applications, and it has resources like servers, storage, and are owned and operated by third-party cloud service providers like Microsoft Azure. Microsoft Azure is a very good example of public cloud. So here, every component that the user is using is running only on Azure. That's public cloud. Right, let me talk to you about some of the advantages of public cloud. Some of the advantages is low cost because there's no need to purchase hardware or software, and we pay only for the services that we use in public cloud. And there is literally no maintenance. because the service provider maintains the environment for us. And with public cloud, we have nearly unlimited scalability, meaning we can get resources on demand and can meet our business requirements on demand. And the public clouds are very highly reliable because they have a vast network of servers and they ensure that our application does not fail. So there are some advantages of public cloud. Let's talk about private cloud. Now, private cloud consists of compute resources used extensively by one business or one organization. Now, this private cloud can be physically located at our organization's on-site data center, or it can be hosted by a third-party service provider. Whichever the case, the private cloud services and infrastructure are always maintained on a private network, and they're maintained on hardware and software that are dedicated solely for one organization or solely for your organization. So in short, private cloud in Azure is Azure services being run within an on-premises data center or on-premises data center used by the user to host systems or applications. And some of the advantages is it gives more security. Resources are not shared with others, so a higher level of control and security over our resource and application is possible. And then we have hybrid cloud. Now, hybrid cloud is the best of both worlds. So it combines the features of both public and private cloud. And some of the user components are being run on Azure and others within on-premises data center. So they kind of share the resources. In other words, they kind of share the application. Half of the application would be running in on-premises and half of them would be in the cloud, and they would be working in harmony to support the application and the business need. So that's hybrid cloud. This is another good example question that wants to test how well you pick services, or how well have you understood Azure products and services and are picking the right service for the need. So the question would go like this: what kind of storage is best suited to handle unstructured data? There are a lot of storage options available, and the requirement here is what or which one would you choose for unstructured data? The answer for that question is blob storage, because blob storage is designed to support unstructured data. It works in this way. It places the data into different tiers based on how often they are accessed. Different tier means different performance. Different performance means different cost associated with it. So a lot of add-on advantages will we get when we use blob storage for unstructured data. In addition to it, any type of unstructured data can be stored in blob storage. This is not true with a couple of other storage options that we have in Azure. Only with blob storage we can store any type of unstructured data. And the data integrity is maintained every time an object is changed in the blob storage. And the best part is the blob storage helps increase applications performance and reduces the bandwidth consumption for that application. So they are the benefits that we get for blob storage, and blob storage are the ones that are well suited for unstructured data, and that's what your answer should be. It's really an 5-step process, and if you have worked and if we have done some labs, some basic labs with Azure, you can easily answer this question. So it's a 5-step process. First step is to log into the Azure. The second one is to create an resource or a resource manager. And within the resource manager, you would be selecting the resource. And then pick the operating system. Do you want Windows or Linux? And within Windows, what's the flavor you want? Or within Linux, what's the flavor you want? So decide on it. And then entering the relevant information like the name of the instance or the VM that we're going to launch, and the password, the URL that goes with it, and a couple of other relevant information that gets itself attached with the VM. And then select the size of the virtual machine. Different size, different types available for the kind of application and for the intensity of the application that will be running on top of it. So select the size of the virtual machine, review everything, whether they're good or not. If there are any changes required, go back and edit them, and then come back and launch, and your VM is there for you to start working within like 3 or 4 minutes, not even 5 minutes. Within 3 or 4 minutes, it gets ready and you can start working on it. So it's a quick and it's a 5-step process, and you should be able to answer it easily if you have done a few labs in Azure. Let's now look at some scenario based question. You've been posed with a scenario. So we thought through it and we picked some common scenario based questions that are being asked in an interview, and I thought we'll present it for you with the answers, with explanation, so you can get benefited through it. So let's look at this question. You're asked to make sure your virtual machines are able to communicate securely with each other to ensure security or to have good amount of security. What would you do? And the correct and the best answer for this would be using virtual network in Azure, which enables us to communicate with the internet securely, which enables us to communicate with the on-premises data center in a secure fashion. So the advantage of using virtual network is users can create their own private network, users can pick their own private IP ranges, users can create their own subnet, users can create their own routing between those two subnets. A lot more goes into that virtual network, so it's very customizable, and the users are provided with an isolated and highly secure environment for applications. It's completely isolated from other customers, it's completely isolated from other applications that are running in other virtual network that we own. So within our account, we can have multiple virtual networks, and one application running on a virtual machine is completely isolated from other applications running on other virtual machines. And of course, all traffic stays within the Azure network, Azure virtual machine, or within the Azure network, depending on how you set up the routing. If you have set up a routing to go or reach the internet, it's going to go, otherwise it's going to stay within Azure. If you have set up routing to reach on premises, then it's going to go and reach on premises, otherwise it's not going to go and reach on premises, it's going to stay within the Azure. And it also allows users to design their own network, like we already discussed, picking up IPs, picking routing, picking subnets, how many servers should be present in that particular subnet, or how many servers should that subnet accommodate, the size of the subnet, the IP ranges, the NATing, the masking of IPs, creating of VPN, all that's possible with the virtual network. So it really allows users to design their own network, and using virtual machine is how we secure applications in the cloud. Let's look at this other scenario. How do you ensure that every time a user logs in, they are not asked to re-enter the password as part of authentication? So you really don't want your users to re-enter the password every time they log in to a different application. Well, all the applications have their authentication mechanism in place. All of them wants to authenticate the user before they log in. Ensuring the user does not log in every time does not mean that wiping away all the authentication and authorization that's present in that application. You still need that in place, but how do you make the user hassle free so they're not asked to re-enter the password or the same password again and again? Let's look at the options available. The first one is to enable Microsoft account authentication. Well, it's not going to fix, because with that the user will still need to re-enter the username and password. Deploy Express Route. It's not going to fix either, because Express Route is a network level service that connects on premises to the cloud. So that has got nothing to do with prompting or not prompting for password. And then we have set up VPN between on-premises data center and Azure, set up AD domain controller in VM, and implement integrated Windows authentication. Well, you can use the same username and password for on-premises and the cloud, but this setup, the VPN and the AD controller setup, it's not going to stop you asking for repeated passwords. So this is all about using the same password in on-premises and in the cloud, and this has got nothing to do with not prompting the user to re-enter the password. All right, so that's same password is different from not prompting the user to re-enter the password. They are two different scenarios, so that is also out of the equation. And the last one is configure AD sync to use single sign-on. That's the right one. So when we configure the AD to use single sign-on, then it's not going to ask for the username and password every time we access an application, because we have logged in, and that login is going to stay active for like 24 hours or so, depending on how you configure it. And within that time, you can access a lot of other applications, and it's not going to ask for the username and password because you already have a single signed on and you have signed in using the right credentials. Let's look at this one. You need to ensure that virtual machines remain available while migrating to Azure. What would be the appropriate service to use? Right, let's look at the options. Traffic Manager. Traffic Manager is literally a DNS service. And then let's look at the other one, Update Domains. It again has to do with Traffic Manager, updating the URL. So the Traffic Manager gets updated and then starts sending requests to that particular URL. It's going to take some downtime because when we update the URL, they will have to be populated to all different places and it takes time. So within that time, any user trying to access, it's going to fail. And then we have Express Route and Cloud Services. Express Route could be in fact, it's the right answer because Express Route, it's an extension of our on-premises and cloud environment. And in this question, it really comes out from a customer who's having an hybrid environment. So they have applications running in on-premises, they have applications running in the cloud, and they want to have a way to migrate applications from on-premises to the cloud. In other words, kind of do a cutover between on-premises and the cloud. And this Express Route is a service that connects between on-premises and the cloud. So when you do the cutover, the traffic is now sent to the cloud instead of being handled in on-premises. In fact, the services and the application is getting shut down in on-premises. So the request will come in the same pattern. Instead of they being handled in on-premises, they are now routed to the cloud using Express Route, and the API calls get addressed or the queries gets answered in the cloud through the Express Route service. Look at this question. You are an administrator for a website called WebGame and you are required to validate and deploy changes made to your website by your development team with minimum downtime. So the real question is, how do you validate the deployment changes that's made by the development team? Let's look at the options. Create a new linked resource, create a staging environment for the site, enable remote debugging on the website, and then create a new website. Well, why would you want to create a new website? Just to validate the changes. And doing a remote debugging is not going to help because debugging only captures logs of the changes happening. It does not do anything with validating the changes. Create a staging environment could be or is the right answer, because when we have staging environments, anything that we run on production can be run on staging environment, and any failures that would happen in production, if we simply run it in production, can be captured when we run the application in the staging environment. So that way, staging environment is a very helpful and useful service, and that way I can catch any errors. In other words, I can validate the changes that were done by my development team before I move it to production, and that reduces the downtime in the production environment. Look at this one last question that we have for you. It's our standard tier application is used across the world and uses Azure Website Standard Tier. It uses large amount of image files, so you can get it. This could be an e-commerce website which has a lot of pictures in it. And this is causing the application to load slow. How can we handle this situation? Let's look at the options given. Configure blob storage with custom domain. Well, this application has pictures, but only the pictures is not all that the application has. Right? So configuring blob storage might not help. This could be an very interactive website and that can't be run from blob storage. Let's look at the other options. Configure Azure Website Auto Scaling to increase instances at high loads. Now, it's the picture that's causing issues for the website. It's not the CPU or it's not the memory unavailable, memory not enough, that's causing the application to be slow. So we need to identify what's causing the application to be slow. So it's not the CPU, it's not the memory. So configure Azure for auto scaling is not going to help. And then what are the other options? Let's see. Configure Azure CDN to cache all responses from the application's web endpoint. A CDN could be the right answer, but look at that. It says a CDN to cache all responses from the application's web endpoint. CDN is not designed for that. Though it can do it, that's not the best way to use CDN to capture all responses from the application's web endpoint. The proper design for CDN would be to cache the frequently used ones. In other words, cache the static content, which are photos, videos, logos, and pictures, and a lot more. Static content that never changes. Let's look at the last option. Configure Azure CDN to cache site images and content stored in Azure Blob Storage. Absolutely correct. So here we will have to redesign the application to store the pictures, high quality, lazy loading or slow loading pictures because of the high quality and the bigger size. So store them in CDN, and then the content, let it be stored in Azure Blob Storage. That's the right way of designing the application, and if we do it, this application is going to run faster, or the application is going to respond faster to the users.
And there you have it, the conclusion of our captivating Azure Advanced full course. We hope you found this video both useful and entertaining. If you have any questions about the topics covered, please feel free to ask away in the comment section below. Our experts will be there to address your concerns. Thank you for watching and keep learning.
Staying ahead in your career requires continuous learning and upskilling. Whether you're a student aiming to learn today's top skills or a working professional looking to advance your career, we've got you covered. Explore our impressive catalog of certification programs in cutting-edge domains, including data science, cloud computing, cybersecurity, AI, machine learning, or digital marketing. Designed in collaboration with leading universities and top corporations, and delivered by industry experts, choose any of our programs and set yourself on the path to career success. Click the link in the description to know more.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.